Doing very well. About 3 weeks ago.
Is that a bouncy?
Doing great now, but I've seen this on some rest of my exposure. How about you?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing well.
Good.
You're thinking the state of the maybe just take over.
How about the one you're staying in? Really? Is it too late? I'm not kidding. No, let's go. How about a half hour now? Yeah, there's If you drink too much impression How about the apple? Are you trying to run that? Yes. What time? I'm driving up Monday morning. You're driving up Monday morning? You can go home with her then. Driving home Monday night.
She just wants to walk for the free beer. That's so.
Hey, it's not HR change. That's a Carroll Engineering. Yeah. You should definitely be there. You should let me know. I'll see if I can get both opportunities one day.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting of April 19th, 2022. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and the meeting may also be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. Our first agenda item tonight is number 3, discussion and possible approval of final land development plan for 708 East Union Street for a truck repair building. Rick, can you lead us through it?
Sure. At the top of the screen is East Union Street. This is a building addition. New building is shown here, existing building here. There's a sewer and water connection here. There are stormwater facilities, underground infiltration bed located here to service the additional impervious area. Discharges to an existing stream at the back through a level spreader here. It's about a 3,600 square foot building. and that's the only improvement to the site. Meets all of our code requirements, and the Planning Commission has recommended it for approval.
Thanks, Rick. Are there any questions from the board about the proposed building addition?
I had a question regarding the private drinking water well on lot. Is that going to remain, or are they going to go public?
No, should it remain?
Okay, and that was okay?
Yes.
Because that was one of the primary issues that they addressed.
Yeah, we don't regulate water wells, that's the county health department. So it's a pre-existing well, been used for quite a while. The only time they would run into a problem with that would be if they were having fire suppression, which they're not.
Okay, how about the other primary issues, the particular turning movements and the lighting plan?
The vehicular turning movements are adequate for the use of the site. This is a very narrow site. There's not really much you can do to improve the access over what it is because of the width. But vehicles can get in and can get out, and fire equipment can access the site. Also inconvenient, they have to back out, but it is accessible on a minimum of 3 sides as required by code. So that's not a concern from our standpoint.
Okay, and the lighting,
I don't believe they added any lighting to the plan.
Is it public sewer?
Yeah, there's a little Tom.
It is public.
Public sewer, yeah.
And is the new infiltration basin, is that designed solely for the new impervious area, or is it going to handle any other part of the site?
It's designed to handle the additional impervious, but it will take a little bit, due to the artery, it will take a little bit of the extra paving as well.
For the existing paving?
The existing, yes.
Okay. Is there additional employment from the result of this building addition?
No, the building addition is simply for additional room to work on trucks, so they don't intend to add any employees for.
Were there any planning commission comments?
Well, there was some concerns. It wasn't a unanimous decision on the planning commission to recommend approval. There was some concern about planting some vegetation at the front of the entranceway. Are you considering doing that?
We do have a landscaping plan that shows some proposed landscaping in the back, and that meets code, and that's all that the applicant is intending to install.
Is there any consideration about putting any landscaping up front?
I don't think so, no.
Well, that was the concern the planning commission members had. So, I don't know, Doug, you doing a public comment up here, I don't know if you want to speak on that or not, but that was a concern the planning commission members, some of them had, about the proposal.
However, the landscaping plan does meet our code requirements.
Right. Yeah, it would be a request rather than a requirement.
Okay. Any other comments from board members? Is there a motion to approve the land development plan for 708 East Union Street?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Robin. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any final board comments or questions about the motion? Are there any public comments or questions? Very good. We're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is item number 4, discussion and possible approval for a final lot consolidation plan for a 15,000 square foot area to be added to 815 Paoli Pike for Perfect Self-Storage LP. Rick.
I do not see anybody in the audience representing the applicant. So I guess at that point it's up to you whether you want to proceed with this or not.
Do we have a time clock issue if we don't?
No, we do not.
Okay, I actually suggest we do not proceed since there's no representation here.
I agree.
Okay. And there's no time issue. We just discussed that in terms of the applicant.
You know, the MPC clock doesn't run out between now and the next meeting.
Next meeting is 2 weeks away.
Yeah, I'll have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure we have plenty of time. I can check it right now.
You did send him a letter.
I did send him a letter.
It says right here, you or your representatives must be present to discuss your plans.
That's at the planning commission, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, that letter
That
was
was for
to the applicant.
Well, if the application was only received February 16th, then you'd be fine. That's what this, the letter to Brian McFadden indicated. I don't know if that's the original date.
I believe it is, but I can double check just to be
You
sure.
found it. Well, 30 days, right? First time commission meeting, and then you March meeting. Anytime. Should be fine.
Okay, then I hear the board would like to table this until the next meeting.
Okay, why don't just real quick, just in case it is, and actually, Rick, it'll give us time. When I looked at this, I realized that this proposed lot being consolidated is actually owned by Stanbury West Goshen LLC, so they need to be an applicant and sign plans as well. The plan as it is now would not be accepted for recording by the recorder of deeds because it shows somebody else's land that's being added to their land, but that signature would have to be on this plan. So that's a simple enough fix, but.
Time expires May 17th.
Yeah,
Okay.
plenty of time.
So we'll table it until the May 3rd meeting. Very good. Next on the agenda is item number 5, discussion regarding the proposed emergency incident notification policy for West Goshen Township. So I know that Tina and John, as board representatives, have been working with staff, Chris, Jamie, Rick, and others, I believe, around some of the updates that we had discussed at previous board meetings relative to the West Goshen Township communication policy. So would you like to lead us through what you've been up to?
Sure. Basically, we've been meeting to update the policy with John Hellman, myself, Chris Bayshore, Andrea Testa, Lisa Cavada, Mike Carroll, Chief of Police Mike Carroll, Lieutenant Mike Cotter, and Rick Kratz, Township Manager. In addition, our new Assistant Township Manager, Jamie, participated in the most recent meeting, and we also brought in Michael Murphy, who's a director, and Michael Grover, who's the Assistant Director for Quality from the Chester County Department of Emergency Services, basically get their take and input on the policy also. The meetings were held on February 28th, March 1st, and April 4th, with the Township's internal group to craft this document, with other conversations occurring outside of these meetings also. The purposes of this policy, particularly, is to facilitate notification to residents and property owners in the township of actual or potential threats or incidents relating to the pipeline, as well as other incidents as deemed appropriate by the incident commander or unified commander. Methods through which to accomplish this include systems available at the township's disposal, including Ready Chesco and also Blackboard Connect. Since we're on that, we've also developed little yellow cards. They're also in the back of the room that will be at every meeting. It tells you how to connect to Westchester's one, which is Blackboard Connect, and also Ready Chesco. We're going to hand these out at all the events. We had an Easter egg hunt Saturday that we handed it out to, and also had a sustainability committee table there. We're putting on all media that we possibly can. We have very, very few people that have signed up right now. And that's a problem because you're not going to get the alerts. You're not going to get emergency or non-emergency alerts. You can sign up very easily, following directions here. You can get them however you want them. You elect whether it's email or text. So this communication policy is only as good as the residents signing up for the alerts and the notification. So I just want to add that one was on. Basically, the policy would set forth notification types and guidelines. In addition to the policy, the township has prepared cards, as we just told you, and they will be at the back of the room at every board meeting also. Be advised that this policy is not before the board this evening for action. The group outlined above is meeting again on May 3rd. This matter is before the board for discussion and input prior to the final action being taken. And the the only change we made as a result of that, other than one you have in front of you as of yesterday, I think I brought this up, for the emergency, we will notify our West Goshen residents, obviously, for incidents that they're signed if they're signed up for it. I brought up the fact that there could be residents that are around the pump station, pipeline pump station, that are in East Goshen, that are not on our Blackboard Connect system. So I wanted to add something in there that the board has not seen yet. Basically, it's just West Goshen, EMC, or the deputy will notify East Goshen. Their EMC, if appropriate, because there are merging townships, so to speak, around the pipeline. And then East Goshen EMC will notify East Goshen residents if they deem appropriate, depending on the nature of the incident. So, however, your system in their system in East Goshen is now is how they're notifying the residents. So that's the only thing that was added to this policy that I wanted to afterwards, since we're so close.
If you're an East Goshen resident right next to the pump station, can you sign up for West Goshen's Blackboard Connect?
What we discussed was that it's best that they use their own system for notification.
We had this conversation a couple of times.
I thought
What was the reasoning behind that?
well, one of the things I thought we wanted to do was make sure that folks got the consistent message right. So we were going to come up with a radius around the pump station, in particular relative to pipeline notifications, and push the folks there to sign up for both Ready Chesco and our Blackboard Connect. And as part of the action review that we still need to come up with is some standardized messaging relative to incidents of public interest that aren't a Ready Chesco alert, so that everyone's getting a standardized but informative message. So one of the concerns I would have is if we're kind of telling the coordinator of East Goshen Township about what's happening, and then they're expecting them to notify their residents, that there's still a lot of potential confusion around what's actually going on with an incident. Yeah. And what will happen is people will just fall to the people they know and about the texting and the whatever else contacts, and it'll be, I'm not sure we're doing a good enough job of addressing a consistent message approach if we don't involve East Goshen residents who live close to the pump station. And that was actually one of the areas for improvement, was to coordinate with other townships. So, I mean, we can't make them do it, and that would be, I would think that would not be a good approach if we can't get them to participate.
Well, that's true. That's one of the issues that we have to resolve still in this policy, and that is the method of communication with the surrounding township, who would do that, and what that would consist of. So that's something we still have to memorialize within this policy. But that's something I think we can do. And part of that is going to be developing templates for messaging as well. That's another area which we need to further flesh out with this policy.
That's all I was to do. But I guess, can they sign up for Blackboard if we elect to go that route? The West Goshen Blackboard Connect system? East Goshen?
I don't see why not. But one of the problematic issues could be if there's a general alert that's going out, you have to make sure that the geographic radius is properly defined. Because if we send out a general alert regarding like delayed trash service or like a road closure or something, or like delayed trash service or a snow emergency, that's going to go to everybody.
And yeah, you can't distinguish between East Goshen and West Goshen.
Yeah.
We click resident, it goes to all residents.
And one of the things we could do in terms of consistency is when we were contacted regarding the construction activity that was going on back in, I guess it was February.
Right.
I contacted Derek and I sent him exactly the information that we put out on our social media. So whatever template message we come up with, I'd be happy to share that with Derek or their EMC or whoever it is, so that they can follow the same message that we're using.
Yeah, I think we just have to get on the phone here and start talking more with East Goshen and tell them where we're at and where we need them to fill in.
and I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe East Goshen utilizes a system like we use. I think they use Constant
Something,
Contact.
yeah.
I think they use Constant Contact, because if you go on their website, you can sign up for Constant Contact emails. It's just an email notification
It's not as
system.
robust as our system by any means. Now, they're planning on getting a more robust system in East Goshen, but they don't have it compared to ours as of today.
The bottom line is that West Goshen Township is responsible for West Goshen Township residents, and East Goshen Township will be responsible for East Goshen Township residents. But then we just have to set up a means of communication between the two, so we have common messaging, to Sean's point, going out to folks when there's an incident that is not of a catastrophic nature. If it is, then Ready Chesko will handle it, and that's not going to be our problem.
This is just for an incident of concern on our network system.
But then following also from that, we still have to determine what the geographical radius will be, just say in this instance, the pump station on Boot Road. How far out are we going to be notifying residents about an incident that may occur? For example, like the one that happened on Memorial Day last year, which wasn't an incident of an emergency nature or a catastrophic one, but it was an incident of concern. We have to determine how far out are we going to notify people. That's something we still have to determine.
Yeah, that still has to be flushed out. But regardless, East Goshen residents need to be notified, equally as much as West Goshen.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way to make that happen.
Yep. And memorialize it in this policy too.
Right. So that's the only open-ended piece right now.
So like currently, when the emergency manager, I can't remember who was the chief, let's take that incident that happened in Blue Road as an example. The first one to respond was the chief from Goshen.
Right.
And so when he shows up, he's obviously in contact with kind of the whole area, right? I mean, are they the ones that are passing the information along as the situation progresses? And would they be notifying East Goshen of what's happening? Or not?
Not necessarily.
No.
They notify county.
Depending on what's going on, the fire department and the police department will both be there, but not necessarily in communication with that command, because we're going to have patrol officers there assisting with perhaps patrol while other things are going on in the township. So they may be doing just their job while the fire chief is running the incident and making decisions and determining what type of incident it is.
So even though they serve East Goshen Township, they're not going to necessarily be working with them to tell
Not
what's happening
necessarily.
in their township. Okay.
The policy states that the individual who has the authority to activate the policy, which is the incident commander, is responsible for establishing that an incident of the concern is occurring and shall instruct township staff to send out the Blackboard Connect message. So that's, our EMT, deputy EMT, Chris, police chief, to send the message out. The incident commander is not going to be working on a system to send the message out.
No,
It's
they have
fire
other
chief.
things to handle at that
Yeah.
point. So, my concern is I want East Goshen notified equally as much as
I
West
know,
Goshen,
but
so we need to.
The system that we put together, this Blackboard Connect, is
Right.
not just for pipeline and pump station issues.
That is correct.
It's for road closures, it's for storms. And
Right.
so when people sign up for it, they're signing up for all of the things that are happening in the township. Now, I don't know if East Goshen residents are fine with that. If they are, then I think they should be able to sign up so that if something is happening, they can just jump on.
The intention was to have a specific geographical area, identify specifically the pipeline incidents, and only notify those residents of the standardized messaging, not to have necessarily township-wide incident of concern messaging going out. That was what we have in our action plan. Notification, geographic policy, incident communication policy. West Goshen Township should reach out to neighboring municipalities, order them to discuss the overlap messaging effort for pipeline incident. So it's like John was just saying, it's supposed to be a defined area where if there's a leak and the fire is, companies respond in the middle of the night like they did on the Memorial Day weekend incident. Those residents who are immediately around that area get the message that's activated by our EMT lead or chief or whoever else is on the scene and responsible for activating the incident of concern, public concern messaging.
And also, just to follow through with that scenario there, then the township manager would inform all of the board members what's going on. And then I would think then also the township manager should have conversation with his counterpart in East Goshen to let them know what's going on.
But my point is, if that geographic area where our system could go out can encompass some of East Goshen, if those residents want to sign up for Blackboard Connect, and they won't be getting, if that's the case, if we only use it for the pipeline, they're not going to be getting the general notifications. Or is that not true?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't do it?
It doesn't work, yeah. The
Doesn't
Blackboard
work.
Connect doesn't work that way.
So if you're signing up, you're getting everything that goes out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can target a geographic location, however, as Dave said, if we're sending out just a general one to like all residents, anyone who signed up is going to get it, so even residents in East Goshen will get phone calls about delayed trash service, snow emergencies, etc.
When you sign up as an East Goshen resident, can you exclude yourself from the general by specifying some geography parameter that you
No, you sign up just as a resident.
So how do we differentiate when there's a pipeline-only incident, there's a geographic region that gets a specific message?
We can do that, but only hit the West Goshen residents in that
You
radius.
can target on their end, you
Yeah.
can't target on your own end.
Now, East Goshen, if they have a system, they can do the same.
Well, I think we've answered one of the questions on this corrective action plan.
I think the best course of action would be for us to notify our residents through Blackboard Connect and for Township staff to have communication with their appropriate counterparts in the other municipalities.
Yeah, we need to put that down here. Are there any other issues that the board sees with this policy at this point that still need to be addressed? Do we have another meeting coming up, which is May 2nd?
Third.
May 3rd? Where we're going to try to finalize this.
We'd like to bring your comments into it so we can finalize it after May 3rd to get it moving as soon as possible.
So my other question is, do we understand what a full test of the West Goshen Township emergency communication system components look like?
Yes, I think Andrew is very, Andrew and Lisa have done this many times
Okay.
and are very comfortable in what has to be done for the test.
Test neighborhoods or geographic regions in the township should be notified in advance of the test date. So are we going to do a specific test of the geographic defined area, not just the West Goshen-wide communication?
Well, I think that was part of another question. We have to determine whether or not annual testing in conjunction with Chester County Department of Emergency Services, if that's doable. And if so, yeah, it should be township-wide. And what we did right in there, we wanted to keep it somewhat open. It needs to be done periodically, but at least done at least once a year on an annual basis.
Okay.
What about, and this might be a whole other conversation, what about evacuation and evacuation routes and instructions and
That would
follow?
be Cheska.
Yeah, that would be, there are different levels. After this all gets set in place, and also we have an annex to our EOP, which is another conversation, which is in conjunction with this. Then we need to have a tabletop exercise to test it, like we did back in September. But then we can even talk about a field exercise, where you may be talking about evacuation. That's a much higher level of testing of an emergency operation plan. We're not close to that yet.
Yeah, so if I look at the corrective action plans, there's 2 or 3 things that need to be completed before this is kind of in a shape ready for another tabletop exercise, if I'm reading it right. So we have to get these messaging templates set up, right?
Yes.
We have to have a definition, more defined way in here, as we've just discussed, about how you would notify East Goshen as a neighboring municipality. So that was one of the concerns about the pipeline incident for a event of public concern. And we also had in here specific messaging platforms, which ones are going to be, this matrix of standard messaging, how it goes out on different platforms needs to be clear. And I guess, Peter, what you described with the cards and everything else is the way we're trying to do a mass marketing campaign to get people to sign up for HSGO on Blackboard, right?
Yeah, we'll have them at all West Goshen events, whether it's the police or parking recs or any of the departments, will have them there available to hand out. and also on the Facebook pages. I think the police have one, and apartment recs have one. I think you have one also, that you Dave, Facebook page.
Emergency services, or emergency ops.
Right.
And then, I know the Blackboard Connect was shared on social media either yesterday or today.
And we're also going to have it every monthly newsletter that West Goshen puts out. Will be on that also.
And then we get our digital sign at the park.
So once we define this geographic area around the pump station and we get these specific messages, would we want to mail a card to everyone who's in that area?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be worth
In
it.
fact, I would be willing to already to door knock in that specific area. It would be that big an area. I mean, that's just go ahead and knock on the door and say, are you signed up? We need you, have you signed up? Within, let's say, 1,000 feet of the pump station on Route Road. If we decide it should be further out or whatever it might be, but we needed to start to determine what the radius would be and then make sure all those folks are signed up.
All right, had a good discussion. Are any other board questions? Otherwise, let's hear what anyone in the room would like to say. Okay, so comments from folks. Walker,
Does this thing work?
Blackboard Connect.
Yeah. Can I get on it? Can we run a test? You guys are trying to run a marathon, and I'm talking about crawling. So I have a bunch of neighbors that have signed up for this. I've signed up for it. And have you been consulting with the neighbors to see what they think and what their interests are and what their concerns are?
Well, this is our way of communicating, this platform. It's what we have, Walker. So if you sign up, hopefully people are getting the messages. I don't know how can we send something out, Dave?
I'm signed up. I know a bunch of my neighbors are.
Do you get messages?
No.
How are you signed up?
I did what Casey told me to do. So I signed up on Blackboard Connect.
We've had a lot of people sign up and they've gotten rid of their landlines. They don't put their cell phones on.
I've got,
Emails have
I
changed.
used email, was my preferred.
Then you should get the email.
I'm not getting this one. So I think you need to make sure that this thing's up and running.
The last,
And then we can invite people to join. I mean, all my neighbors are waiting for it. I mean, it's been, well, Memorial Day's coming up. It's been a year since we had the incident. So, and East Goshen is fairly far away, but if we, as the chairman pointed out, if we get a small group and we make sure it works and it's functional and you get the bugs out of it, because the people that live next to the pumping station are willing to put up with a little bit of pain to get something that works, then you can roll it out to a bigger area.
So you're saying you don't get any notifications about trash pickup or delayed or anything? Nothing?
And I've been back and forth with Casey over the last year, you know, and
This hasn't
signed
been a
up
year.
and signed up and
This is only
re-signed
been
up.
the past couple
and-
months.
Yeah, but if this is an emergency notification, how come I get an email at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, then I'll, if I know it was working, I mean, I have no way, Dave,
we can, so,
then I would
the last one that
put
was
it on
sent
my
out
phone.
was April.
I can look at
But
it.
I'm only gonna put it on my phone if it's localized for the pump station.
Well,
I don't-
it'll be for anything that the township puts out.
She's not going to call. You're not gonna call.
This is
Any emergency alert
What you're saying is
notification.
this is non-functional.
So it's
It's
Walker's
not-
question
it's not-
whether it's
it's not
functioning
meeting
correctly.
the needs.
It is functioning correctly. We sent one out, we sent an email out, was it like April 7th, I believe it was, when we rescheduled.
Yeah,
We rescheduled the Easter egg time. And we get,
No, but
we
it
get
doesn't meet the needs of those people living next to the pump station, is what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying non-functional. I should have said it
I
doesn't
wouldn't
meet.
say that that's an accurate statement.
We haven't sent anything out about the pipeline for
Yeah.
forever.
Correct. Because there hasn't been a need to.
Well, we didn't have it when we had the incident.
Correct.
We still haven't got the geographic area, and most people aren't signed up for it. And if you are signed up for it, you get the standard trash pickups later in the week, whatever.
But we get statistics.
But the point is, Walker, that we're going to use it now to provide notification of these incidents that could occur at the pipeline. If you signed up and we're in this geographic thing and we do the tabletop exercise, you'll get it during the tabletop exercise. You can say, yep, it works. If there's a real incident, I'm going to get it. But I agree, you should have it for text for that location, otherwise you're not.
And it depends
You're going to be
on.
out and going over to the pump station, you won't be checking your email.
And the type of message that we send out depends on, or the method of communication depends on the incident. For example, during the winter, when we have snow emergencies and we're asking people not to park on the streets, we will send out a phone call and an email and a text message. But for the Easter egg hunt postponement, we just did an email. And then we posted information on the website.
When you sign up, do you have to enter your email and your phone number?
Enter as much information
You
as
have
you
a
can.
choice. You could select if you want both or one or the other.
Correct.
Okay, well,
And then we,
people are signing up and just putting their phone number for text. You guys are sending emails out. Like, don't you think we should constantly?
Text isn't a very good platform. You're only allowed 60 characters.
I know, but like you said, if it's the middle of the night, something's happening at the pump station, no one's gonna check their
Yeah.
email.
But we've got a ton, we've had this system for years. We've got a ton of old landlines. We rarely get over 40% on phone hits when we send a message out, because there's just a bunch of old numbers in there.
after we send out a message, we get statistics on who responded, how many emails bounced back, things like that. So we do, and we monitor those.
So for people living around the pipeline, they have the choice to enter their phone number, to get a text message about certain things that the township will send out via text. If it's a situation like that, it is going to be sent out via text.
Correct.
But then they also might not get other things like the postponement of the Easter egg hunt that goes to email for them rather.
Correct.
Just trying to, okay.
Could I make a suggestion, if you don't mind? Maybe I could get together with you, work on a small geographic message just to your neighborhood to see if it works.
Sure.
We'll do that this week.
Sure.
That's great. Thanks, Chief. That's exciting.
That'd be great. And Walker, please check who's got old email addresses in there that they never look at, or landline numbers.
I still have a landline number, and I used to get the notification about, snow and all this stuff. And I don't, my home phone hasn't rung up from the township, over a year. So I thought you stopped doing it.
No, I get it.
We
I get
sent,
it.
we sent one out every snowstorm, I think.
Got it.
Okay, other
Check your
questions?
system.
Yes.
Hi, Jeannie Kersler from West Whiteland Township. Sorry, I came in partway into the discussion, but is Blackboard Connect just for non-emergency notifications related to pipelines?
Yeah, they would be instances of concern, like
Okay.
what happened at the pump station
Okay.
on Memorial Day.
Okay.
If it was a catastrophic event, it would be Ready Chesco, which is the countywide system that would go into operation.
Okay.
And that's why I recommend you sign up for both.
Okay, and so what, for the Blackboard Connect, what kind of, do you have an idea on what kind of radius you'd be looking at for notification?
What you mean, like we're
Yeah, like you said, a geographic area.
pipeline specific?
I mean, for the
Yeah.
Boot Road pump station specifically? Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the conversations we're having here.
Yeah.
We're considering possibly 1,000-foot radius, maybe further out, but we have to determine that.
Yeah, I would make a suggestion that, people are generally told evacuate half a mile on foot. So maybe a half-mile radius would be a good option, because anybody in that distance from it now, part of the problem is not everybody is even aware of, the need to do that if there is a concern, but anybody in that radius, if they heard somewhere that night, say for example, they might, of the leak, they might, if they were following the proper protocol, they would get out of their house and run away. So that might be something to consider, is the half-mile radius.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Sean,
Yep.
is there a contact for energy transfer for the township to contact them directly and for them to issue an emergency alert that's
So
residential?
they're not in the business of doing that. We do have protocols for communication with ET, mainly from the fire and emergency response companies. There are a couple of corrective actions relative to the township, working with Energy Transfer around these incidents of public concern and interest that don't require Ready Chesco, use, but we would want to make sure that our messaging is consistent with how they're describing the incident as well. Other questions or comments? Okay, so what's the wrap on the way forward? So you're meeting May when?
The third, we're going to be meeting, one of your
County
comments
again?
tonight.
Yeah.
No, we're meeting internally on May 3rd with personnel in the township on May 3rd. And then we'll probably finalize it. Once we finalize it internally, we'll run it by emergency services one more time since we made a few changes since we met.
Because this finalizing will include this template of standardized messages for the different types of notifications, right? We're going to get that in place.
The template they're working on right now.
The issues that we have to, here's the ones that I have so far. Add to them if you need to. We need to develop a template of public messaging, make it consistent. We need to memorialize contact with the neighboring townships, specifically East Goshen, again, for consistent messaging. And we need to determine the geographic area for disseminating alerts for non-critical events. And we have to also determine annual testing. Can that be done? Is that doable in conjunction with the Chester County Department of Emergency Services? So those are the issues here which I think are outstanding that we still have to address.
But the one other one was this social media consistency and accuracy. So beyond the Blackboard Connect, we should make sure the policy includes a specific social media matrix about what messages go on what.
That's right.
That might be the different, what may not be as immediate as the Blackboard Connect notifications, but within, by the morning or whatever it would have been on that one we had on Memorial Day, what would be the message that would be posted to our social media?
Well, it's going to have to be very generalized because obviously every event's going to be its own event. But we can try to put together some templates.
Yeah, because that was an action that was listed.
Yeah, that's all I must do.
Okay. And then, Chief, you're going to get with Walker and make sure some of his community can connected actively to Blackboard Connect.
Yes.
We sent several messages in there last spring when we were paving, and we had people with the cars. I know, we talked to some of your neighbors and they were getting it. So maybe we'll check your contact info log first. Make sure you're still in there.
I'm not getting the phone calls I was getting, so, I figured you were saving money and just.
Let me ask you a question. With the brochure that Lisa put together with Tina, it says to sign up for Blackboard Connect, be prepared, voice, text, or email, stay informed. Which would you suggest people sign up for? All three or?
I would do all three.
All three.
Yeah.
So we should encourage people, voice, text, and email, stay informed. Okay, this way if you don't get it one way, hopefully you get it another way.
Right.
Okay.
Very good. Is there any other final comments or questions? We'll close this out and move on to the next agenda item. All right. Ready for agenda item number 6. Discussion and possible awarding of the 2022 pavement marking bid. Chris.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening are the bid results for the 2022 pavement marking project. The bids were opened on April 12th. They're advertised on March 18th and March 25th. There was one bid received from Alpha Space Control in the amount of $188,814. Just by way of background information, this is a project that's shared amongst 5 municipalities, including West Goshen, East Goshen, West Town, Euclid, and Westchester Borough. And then the you're looking at me like I was saying something incorrect. So then Alpha Space Control will bill each municipality based on their share of the work, and I provided the history of the last 4 years of the cost for the township. Mark Bertolami estimates that our allocation would be just under $50,000, and we included $57,000 in the budget for pavement marking. So based on this information, I would recommend awarding the bid to Alpha Space Control.
I'd like to make a motion for that.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Tina. I have a couple of questions. Just how is the scope of work determined for the pavement marking? How is the scope of work each year?
It's all of our intersections, all of our long lines.
On township roads?
Yeah.
Okay.
It varies from year to year, depends on what we're paving. Like this year we're paving 5 points. So that won't get painted on this contract, that gets painted as part of the paving contract.
Yeah, okay. But all the other ones will, what you described, will get done, okay. And then in terms of the administration of this process, given it's, you know, a joint with other municipalities, how's it work? They all approve their piece of it,
We run, just kind of like the Boot Road project, we run the bid. I believe Dave contacts them and asks them if they're interested in going in on the bid and what their area is going to be. I know Westchester Borough scaled back this year.
Yeah.
And then they'll get billed accordingly by the contractor.
But I think, Sean, your question, does every municipal governing body have to approve this same bid
the dollar
at a
amount.
public meeting?
Do they? I don't believe they've done so in the past.
No, we do the same with salt. We're in a consortium with East Goshen, West Town.
And we did
So are we approving are we approving the 188,814 in our motion, or are we approving just the West Goshen piece of it?
No, we generally approve the whole contract.
Okay.
Have you received consent from all the other municipalities that that's what they want you to do based on what their price would be?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Who does our salt then?
West Town actually does the salt.
Okay.
So, we all work together.
It was the same. We did the same thing for salt in Malvern with West Bradford.
So then just for clarification, then tonight we're approving $188,814 contract.
Yes.
Okay, that wasn't my understanding. Okay, so that's where, and then they will reimburse us, is that what they do?
No, each municipality is billed separately. They're all priced off this contract.
You agreed to do the bid, but they're agreeing to pay their proportional share based on what's in their township.
Correct.
So we're only paying $49,920.75.
Let's suppose one of these other municipalities don't pay their share.
Doesn't matter, it's up to them. The contractors agree to take their money from that municipality. You're not on hook for
Okay,
it.
that's where
These numbers?
I'm losing it.
Yeah.
We're approving the entire contract in the amount of $188,000, but our only part of that is going to be $49,920. But if some other municipality doesn't pay their share, are we going to be in the hook with everyone?
That's going to be between them and the contractor.
And it works the same with the salt. If we order $100,000 worth of salt and we don't pay for it, West Town's not on the hook for it, we are.
Okay, so John, your motion is to approve the bid amount of 188,814, is that correct?
Well, this is how this is written, and this is how we have to proceed.
Yeah, so that's what your motion is there, right?
That's very good.
Just trying to get the procedure right here. You did make that motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Peter, you're seconding that amount.
I'm okay, but why can't we just make the motion to approve $49,900?
Because we're running the bid for all the
You bid it as a
municipalities.
cooperative bid,
Yeah,
but
it's a
the economies of
cooperative
scale by bidding it together.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter, as long as you're not on the hook. That's fine. Yes, I do.
You do second.
Second.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Are there any public comments or questions on the motion for the award of the paving bid for 2022? Margie?
I didn't have the time to go back and look, but if memory serves me correctly, sitting through these bids now for a number of years, in the past, is it true that we only went in partnership with East Goshen?
No, it was East Goshen and West Town for the longest time. Then we added Euclid, and then last year, the first year for Westchester Borough.
Again, I always remember this bid coming in at about the 49 or the 50 to 60,000 range, and I thought I always remembered that Mr. Lalonde always made it clear that, we were sharing that with East Goshen, and East Goshen would reimburse us. So this $188,000 is...
Last year was 190 something.
197 was last year's bid.
All right.
Margie, maybe thinking about that special paving project we did last year with East Goshen, where we ran the project and they reimbursed us.
Yeah, I'll go back a couple of years, but... So
Okay,
this is, last year was also 5 municipalities?
Yeah, last year was 5.
And
And
the
the year
total
before
amount,
that, do you remember?
4.
All right.
the total amount last year was 197, 970, 875.
So this is the only bid?
Yes. Well, we talked about this, I remember asking the same question last year, why is there only one bidder? And it's not a business people want to be in, apparently.
So if there's one bid and we have the low bid protocol to go by, does that change the situation because there's just one bidder?
No, I would totally reject the bid. If it's way beyond what you wanted to spend, or you don't find them to be a responsible bidder, you can completely reject the bid.
This was the same company that did it last year, I'm correct?
Same company that has done it for 20 years.
They're a very reputable firm.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other public comments? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next up is agenda item number 7, discussion regarding the proposed structure for a stormwater utility fee for West Goshen Township prepared by HRG Inc. So I'm going to kick this off with some framing, just to help the board get its mind around where we are with stormwater overall, and then we'll talk about the specific information that we received from HRG. So, as has been discussed at many previous Board of Supervisor meetings, the township has significant stormwater management issues that continue to need to be addressed. There are 5 areas of ongoing effort. First is the fact that we have operational activities in the Public Works Department to ensure the township is in compliance with its MS4 permit for stormwater. This primarily consists of street sweeper operations and the cleaning and inspection of inlets and pipe systems. Increased effort is required to meet the 5-year permit requirements, and we've previously discussed the need for routine use of a vacuum truck to perform the necessary inlet drain cleaning, with possible future capital purchase of a vac truck. So that's the first area. Second area is the MS4 permit also has a specific pollutant reduction plan set of projects that has been approved by the PADEP that need to be implemented during the permit period to meet the required reduction targets. So some specific projects that Rick has explained to the board as we've started some design work on those, and we recently, I think at a previous meeting, adjusted some of the information about those projects in a resubmission to the DEP. So that was the second item. Third, there is a need to perform both unplanned emergency repairs and planned public works projects to address known deficiencies in the stormwater system. So, for example, the board approved the costs associated with an emergency repair of stormwater pipe on Loxley Road at our last public meeting. That was unplanned, of course, and in the 2022 budget, we authorized expenditure of the American Rescue Fund planned funds on 3 planned stormwater rehabilitation projects. So that's an example of planned repairs of known areas of concern. The fourth item under stormwater management is the township has in the order of 30,000 square feet of aging corrugated metal pipe infrastructure that is reaching the end of its useful life. To avoid more costly emergency repairs in the future, a planned rehabilitation program is probably required over the next 5+ years. The board has authorized HRG to review the inspection data from the Army Corps of Engineers and determine the highest priority areas that need to be addressed. This review is currently in progress and will report out in the coming months. And fifth and finally, several older neighborhoods were constructed decades ago with either very limited or severely inadequate stormwater systems. Many residents have come and asked the township for a better understanding of what can be done to improve the situation. In response, the board has requested that our engineer, Carroll Engineering, develop a proposal to perform a high-level conceptual review of stormwater management improvement options for these particular neighborhoods. And we are currently awaiting the proposal for board consideration. So the board recognizes that this comprehensive approach to stormwater management improvement will require significant funding, both in operational expenditures and capital investment. Therefore, we authorized HRG to prepare an assessment of how a stormwater utility fee could be implemented for the township. HRG prepared the assessment using impervious area data for property parcels in the township and have proposed 3 options for consideration. Please note there is no action planned tonight by the board. This is a review exercise only to fully understand the options being proposed, get any clarifications that are needed, and seek public input to guide the board on the way forward. Any decisions on the stormwater management funding approached by the board will take place at future public meetings. That was a lot of framing. Thanks for bearing with me on it. Chris, do you just want to help me out here, maybe just describe the 3 options that were in the HRG memo that the board has had in its packet and has been made publicly available?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So there are three options that are laid out in the memo that was provided by HRG. The first option is an equivalent resident unit approach, which essentially creates a structure separating single-family residential and non-single family residential, or single-family residential and non-residential properties. So the single-family residential properties would be paid at the same rate, so essentially you'd have a flat rate structure, whereas the non-residential properties would be billed at a rate of about $4.85 based on every 1,000 square feet of total multiplied by the total impervious area, which would then be rounded up for the property. The second approach is a four-tiered approach, which would group them into tiers. And in the four-tiered approach, properties are grouped into tiers that span from just under 2,000 square feet of impervious coverage up through about, I believe it was 6,000 square feet of impervious coverage. And then the final would be a seven-tiered approach, which would be similar to the four-tiered approach, but it would adjust the range of impervious coverage options. So tier 1 would range from about 500 square feet to just under 1,000, and then tier 7 would be 6,000 square feet of impervious coverage. For these properties, they would be assessed at a rate of $4.85 per 1,000 square feet multiplied by the total impervious area. Same thing for the four-tiered approach.
Very good. And just so everyone understands, the impervious area for a property, how is that determined? Rick or Chris?
It's based on the building and lot coverage that's on the lot, I believe.
Yeah, we use our GIS system to identify the impervious surface, which consists of buildings, driveways, sidewalks, sheds, anything that does not absorb water.
And we have GIS mapping for basically all properties in the township.
Yes.
We believe it's fairly accurate and up to date. That's one of the things that HRG took into account.
It is quite accurate, and it is relatively up to date. I mean, GIS is never up to the minute, up to date, but within a year, most, yes.
And that, basically, the technology, you take a picture from a satellite, right?
No.
How does it explain a little bit?
Aerial photography.
From where?
Aerial photography,
Okay, aerial.
satellite photography.
So you're actually taking a picture, and that picture of what actually is there,
Correct.
and determining what is impervious and what isn't.
Correct.
And one item of note in the memo is it does list credit options to reduce the burden on property owners.
So what I'd like to do as a process is hear the board discuss the memo, what your thoughts and thinking are around these approaches, and then we'll open it up and hear from the public as well around what they think about the particular approach and some of the options that have been presented. So, board, open for you to kick it off.
I'd like to ask one question. Doesn't Westchester Borough have a stormwater fee in place now? Do you know anything at all about that, Kristen?
I wrote the ordinance.
Okay, there you go.
It's been a while ago, though. It's based on impervious cover.
Okay.
It's based on impervious.
And which approach did they adopt? Was it the equivalent resident unit approach
I
or
think it's a tiered approach. Tiered approach based on.
four-tiered approach?
I don't remember the number of tiers.
It's seven.
Yeah.
Seven.
It's just seven-tier?
For a municipality like Westchester Borough, I think the seven-tier approach may make more sense to give because of the density that's there.
Right, lot sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
The one question I have for Rick, based on the conversation you've had so far, if somebody gets a building permit and adds to it, do you automatically, based on that building permit, go back and change the assessment or the tier they're in?
Yes.
You don't wait until GIS catches up, right?
No.
Okay.
No, once we have the data on the approved permit, we would update it then.
Okay. And I know that in the borough, when people got their first assessment, so to speak, there is an appeal process in place and they wanted the first appeal to be handled by, didn't have to go to the full council. It was a sort of an administrative process that, I can't remember who it was, if it was a sustainability coordinator or if it was assistant manager or somebody took the data from the property owners and looked at it and determined whether they made sense and said, oh, okay, the GIS didn't accurately reflect what tier you're supposed to be in. We'll agree to take it to this, reduce the tier or whatever. So that process, I know, happened when the first assessment bills went out.
And how long have they had this policy of the structure implemented? I mean, how many years?
I want to say 4 years. I could be guessing on that one, yeah. Pretty sure it's 4 years. Yeah, and I think they, well,
What issues have they had with the stormwater structure they put in place? I mean, besides the appeal process you just described, have they had any other issues, any other?
sure, they have a pending Commonwealth Court case on the state system of higher education filed that claims that it's not a fee, that it's a tax. That case will be heard through the en banc Commonwealth Court in some future date, hopefully soon. And that will be a very important legal issue that the court has to decide. And it will have relevance to whether or not whatever the court decides will be binding upon, it will be the same legal issue that the state system would file against your
Whether Westchester would then be subject to our stormwater fee.
Universe.
I mean,
Yeah.
some of this, yeah. So I have a kind of an interesting question. I might have asked this before. Is this allowed to be just commercial? Does it have, a fee have to apply to every?
The fee structure would have to apply to everybody that has impervious cover, yes.
Yeah, there's
You could
no
just
exemption
allow
of the college or anything.
commercial or anything like
No,
that?
the fee is for a fee, anything when it's a fee, the law behind it is that anybody that uses the system, so the system is your drainage system. The township-owned drainage system, any property that uses your system has to pay the fee, no different than your sewer system. You can't exempt properties from paying, obviously there's some in the law, if you're based on your income levels, I think below a certain number. But, so that's important in order to keep it from being identified as a tax, that the users of the system have to pay the fee.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because it says 90% of the properties are residential, but they only constitute 36% of the impervious surface, which is, you know, a shame. Anyway, so regarding the 3 options that we've been presented with, so I looked over these. I don't think that this equivalent resident unit approach is something that I would be in favor of adopting, personally speaking, because I feel like it's regressive, and I feel like,
I'm sorry, can we use the microphones, please?
I'm sorry, yeah.
I was just saying that I'm not, if the stormwater fee is something that's going to pass, I'm not in favor of the equivalent resident unit approach. I would be more in favor of the 4-tiered approach. I just think it's a shame that we have to, consider a fee, I'll be honest with you. I'm not in favor of a fee, but I also recognize sort of what's been happening to our stormwater system, and I don't see a tax structure in place that's able to support what's needed to be done. So I'm looking at the 3 options that we have here, and I'm asking the questions, you know, because our commercial and industry are large contributors to the impervious surface in this township. Do we have the breakdown of how their payments, like how they're going to pay their fee? The commercial.
Same way we just have the sewer and trash, you send them a bill and.
No, meaning are they?
Based on impervious cover.
Yeah. Is it the
Impervious
same?
cover, yeah.
Is it the same as what's outlined here?
It's
Yes.
a rate per 1,000 square feet of impervious cover, so
Okay.
the bigger they are, the more they're paying.
And so they also provided us with a draft.
So actually, if you hold coming to that, the detail of the cost involved with it, just to talk about the philosophy issues that you just raised up.
Okay.
So I think it's a good, so I'd like to hear more the board around the approach of a fee versus a tax. Like my understanding is most municipalities have gone towards a utility fee approach. I don't know if that's a completely true statement or we have data for it, at least locally, that's what I'm hearing. Did the borough get their MS4 permit several years ago when they implemented this, or did they implement this before they got their permit? Do we know that?
I think they implemented it before they had their permit. But I think that you are in the forefront of having the dialogue and discussion. I know that there are other municipalities that have a fee, but I think a lot of people are just starting the analysis of the process and you know, thinking through how to best handle it. So
Let me look to Rick, because Rick's been involved with this area for some time. Rick, do you have a feel for how many municipalities in the Commonwealth that really more lean towards a fee approach versus general taxation to fund stormwater?
I don't have specific numbers. but probably in the area of 10% have decided to adopt the fee. The problem with equating that to anything is it's not that the other 90% chose not to adopt the fee, it's the other 90% who chose to do nothing. So there's no way to really accurately judge until you go down the road. And the other thing to keep in mind about permits, when you talk about when did the borough get their permit, the borough got their permit in 2003. The permit is supposed to be amended every 5 years, which did not happen. The first amendment took almost 15 years. So that was the quote permit that you're referring to with the fee is the amendment to the original permit. And I believe the borough did get theirs after the fee was in place, but before we got ours.
Yeah, I don't think every municipality is tying the analysis to their permit. I think it's a broader discussion. I just had it in West Bradford. They have a bunch of failings similar to you do, neighborhoods that were built in the 70s, and property owners coming to them saying, I can't afford to replace this drain pipe, will you help me? And they're starting to see these number of requests increase every year, and they're just starting to have the dialogue of, well, okay, we really need to get a handle on what this cost will be going forward and how we're going to pay for it. So I think the conversations are starting if they haven't already.
Next week, we'll be attending the PSATS conference, and I think you'll be able to find an answer to that question, Sean. There actually is going to be a seminar on that, so we can find out what other municipalities are doing.
So a couple of thoughts from me. I mean, I certainly, I think Ashley's got a great point about the equivalent residential unit approach. Our other fees in the township, though, are based on individual usage, if you like. So the sewer is a flat rate, the trash is a flat rate. I do think there's a difference, in my mind at least, that makes me question whether the equivalent residential unit approach is the right thing for stormwater. So, but we haven't had a fee that differentiates between neighbors in this township at this point. It's just a comment. Other thoughts from the board about the philosophy approach before we get into numbers, etc., on costs, etc.?
I have a question regarding the four-tier approach, which is, since the bills are issued on the amount of IA present per parcel, is that going to be an administrative cost to manage this approach and time associated with that, which is, soft costs in there, but does that mean we have to hire more staff now? Because we have this approach that we're using, it's specialized based on what is actually usage, for lack of a better word. Basically oriented towards the individual person.
Yes, a crystal brick,
that's my concern.
Approach. You're going to have to hire a dedicated stormwater person to manage appeals, credits, billing.
Right, billing mainly.
From what I've seen from other municipalities, people have departments, or some municipalities choose to have full departments or staff that handles that.
Rick and I met someone in Villanova from Lower Allen Township, whose job is just to administer this program.
But the truth is, though, is that with the equivalent residential unit approach, you can be living next door to somebody who's taken no, regard and built tons of things on their property, and they're paying the same rate as you're paying. You can have a gravel driveway and, pretty much no extra buildings, and it's like, how is that fair?
Well, I go back to what Sean said with the trash and sewer. We don't base it on usage. We base it on everybody has the same amount we pay. Flat base.
I know. I'm just in my mind. I'm seeing a small house, with a lot of open space, and I'm seeing one of those gigantic houses with a huge porch and patio, and people that have long driveways, all paying the same rate.
And larger houses. No, I appreciate that concept. But, I don't want to be hiring a lot of staff to manage this either.
Well, I think that's what you're walking into when you decide to slap a stormwater fee on residents. You're going to have to manage that.
No, I agree, but hiring one person versus a couple people to manage, depending on which approach we pick.
Okay.
I'm trying to minimize.
So, whichever approach you pick, you're going to have to maintain an impervious layer in your GIS system no matter what. So we have a GIS technician. He's developed the impervious layer we have now. He will continue to maintain it. Although, just so you're aware, right now he's doing jockeying permits about 100% of the time. So some of his time is going to need to be allocated out of that to do the impervious updates for the stormwater system. But we have the people to do it at this point. But yes, that layer will have to be maintained no matter what approach you take.
And so will staffing for collection of bills, sending out bills, listening to resident issues, I mean, that's somebody right now with Cheryl Wilkinson doing it for sewer and trash. And
I don't understand the difference between you put stormwater fee on a sewer and trash bills, and that's the sewer, trash, and stormwater. And I'm not saying this is my point of view, but it's a flat fee for everyone, or whatever it is. And there's no appealing and all this that you have to manage. If it's that way, can we manage it with existing staff? Versus if we go with a tiered approach, absolutely you need to have an additional headcount. Is there a differentiate between the two approaches in terms of township staff requirements between the?
I would guess yes.
I think if you go with a tiered approach, it's more likely that you're going to need to expand your utility billing staff. A flat rate approach, particularly on the residential side, would be easier to implement than the existing staff that we have. Okay. I'm not saying you're not going to have to hire somebody. I think the likelihood is less.
Okay. So we don't have a clear way forward on that, but at least we've explored the subject. Right.
The ability, though, with the tiered approach is that you do have this ability to sort of improve your property and add things that can service credits, and you can lower your bill. And so it does give people the amount of control by having a fee, and actually I think that's in what the definition of a fee is a fee has to be something that people have the ability to
I think we'd still have to do
levy
credits
themselves.
even with correct from wrong, Rick. We'd still have to do credits even if it was the non-tiered approach.
Correct. It doesn't matter which approach, you still have to offer credits.
And the 12% that are exempt,
I believe so.
Otherwise you can't have a fee.
So if you have two properties,
I have to check it. I mean, I think that's a policy decision.
Yeah, it could be mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's a
I
policy.
think
That's
that's,
great. Could we have that as an action then, please? I would like to know the answer to that.
yeah, I think it's part of the law.
I've never not seen it offered, but it's more to incentivize people to take green measures and BMPs and work towards the goal of improving water quality.
so my question is that if you already live on a property that's taking those measures, then and we were to go with this equivalent residential unit, then you would immediately be able to apply for credits
However you want
versus
to,
your
it's
neighbor.
how you want to legislate it. So one of the things I know in the borough was the credit section was written in, but then there's a whole other process that they went through to develop a credit manual. And there's a separate credit manual that was adopted after the ordinance was adopted that spelled out all the different details of when you're entitled to the credit, how you get the credit, when does the credit get applied, the process you have to go through. So that's literally a separate part of the code in the ordinance.
And in looking at page 7 of the memo, in the credit options, it does state, in order for fees in the Commonwealth to be defensible, property owners should have the ability to control the magnitude of their bill based upon actions on their property to control stormwater. For a stormwater fee, this comes in the form of credits. These credits provide the township a benefit based on variable costs associated with stormwater program budget, and then he outlines some examples.
I think it's best practices to offer the credit, but I don't think it makes your ordinance unlawful if you don't. I'll put it that way.
It would make it a lot easier for you, though, to defend it in court if we did have credit.
Yeah, and again, Michael Gill in my office is the one who's knee-deep in this litigation, and I'm going to have some issues for him. I talked to him before the meeting, I'd like to talk to him after. Again, because in my mind, the fee is supposed to be based on the amount that you use the system. So to the extent that you're getting credit because you're reducing how much you use the system, that ties into that the fee should therefore be reduced. You're using the system less.
But if a fee is also based on how much you use the system, then impervious coverage is also dependent on how much you use the system.
Right, that's why the tiered approach in some respects, and that's actually one of my other questions that I wrote down here, does that make it more defensible?
Yeah.
and then the 12% that is exempt, is that because they are 500 square feet in the exemption? Is that what makes them exemption, the 12%?
That's-
Impervious area breakdown?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's acceptable legally, to have exemptions just based on small lots.
Yes, you can do that. I mean, it's almost like you're saying that the cost to administer for less than 500 square feet isn't worth the hassle of doing it.
Which is actually what we already do with the simplified approach to stormwater management. That kicks in at 500 square feet, it goes to 2,000 square feet of impervious, and then over 2,000 square feet, you need to meet full ordinance requirements.
So here's the other piece of information that's really interesting, is that the number of properties with impervious surface from like 500 to about 2,000 is only 459 properties. And then most properties, 3,200, am I reading this right? In the four-tier approach column, 3,280 properties between 2,000 and 4,000. So I'm just saying that the majority of properties that would be subject to this fee of single-family, residential are above 2,000 square feet. My point is that the equivalent residential unit approach, I feel like is just completely, you have so many huge properties, is my point. You have so many huge properties with impervious surface that I don't understand why they would be paying the same thing as people who don't have that.
If you actually do the math, if you look at the first three tiers, there's still a substantial number of residential properties that are in the 6,000 plus impervious area that are lumped in with all the other commercial properties that are in that 1286, because at the beginning it gave the numbers of non-SFR was only 682.
So is this commercial and
So
SFR?
1286, 682 are non-single family residents. So there's a few other categories here. No LUC was 9, but half of that 1286 apparently is residential property.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, actually, there's a very big spread of
I'm just trying to
impervious area associated with residential property. Other thoughts from the board around the tier versus a flat fee?
Well, I just want to broaden that question a little bit, Sean, and maybe back up. Given climate warming and the effects of it that we're experiencing everywhere, one piece of data I think is very important to point out that 90% of the properties are residential. However, these properties only represent about a third of the impervious area of the township. So we can either continue to do what we're doing, just tax people to be able to address the 5 areas of concern that you originally raised, and just kind of go along that way and maybe end up having to increase taxes for everybody, all the residential properties in the township, which would exempt a lot of properties. Whereas a fee, if it was put into place to address those areas that climate warming is bringing upon us, I think it would be much more fair to those people who live within the township. So I would favor a fee structure as opposed to increasing taxes to address those areas that we have to start addressing that have not yet been addressed for so many years, probably decades, but we have to start dealing with it now. And I think a fee structure would be easier to explain to residents, plus it would be directly applied to those areas that have to be addressed in dealing with stormwater.
Well, just to elaborate on that, John, I guess we should talk a little bit about the tax versus the fee. From what I'm seeing, it appears as though if you take an example of the residential, and taxes, they'll be paying 57%, and the impervious area is 36%, versus a fee cost. So their fee would actually be less than what they're paying on taxes.
That's John's point.
Yeah.
But the tax falls more on the residential use than it does than using impervious area in a fee-based approach. Okay, so we've talked about fee, a fee versus tax. We've talked about tiered structures. We've had a debate about single flat fees versus tiered approach. We've talked about the difference between this and existing fees that are flat-based. What I'd like to do now, before we talk about the dollars involved that's in this assessment, but I'd like to just hear from the public. If you could just focus any questions at the moment related to the philosophy philosophy of the stormwater fee, taxation, the approach, the issues that I raised in framing it, and then we'll have a follow-on discussion with another opportunity to comment relative to the dollars that were in this assessment and what that means in terms of, in this case, a fee structure. So I'm opening it up for public comment on the conversation you've just heard and what your thoughts are relative to that. Doug?
Well, in residential, some residential properties drain more onto the street and use the stormwater facilities than other properties. Other properties just drain away from the street.
Onto other people's properties.
Or on other people's properties, or back into the woods or whatever. So it's a good discussion here because if you have a flat fee for everybody, it's more, everybody knows they're paying the same rate. But if someone puts an additional into their property or does some more impervious surface modification, they're going to be paying the same rate. And maybe you can have a situation where, like the credits, where if they do an addition, but then they put additional stormwater management on their property, plant trees to offset their addition. So it's complicated.
What was your point?
So you say you favor a fee, or I'm trying to.
Well, originally when this started with my dad, they favored the fee, the quarterly fee. They talked about $12 to $15 a quarter, but for everybody. But that was beginning discussions. But now you're talking about how to make this more practical for people so that they can reduce their costs by improving their properties, planting trees, putting additional stormwater management onto their properties, things like that.
I guess just to build on what you're saying, and again, this is just my point of view, is if you had a neighbor who put in a lot, a big expensive driveway or more building, and some of that, even if there's not much more improvement to stormwater on the property, and maybe you as a neighbor experience more runoff, maybe at least if you knew he was having to pay more in his fee from doing what he did, it would actually feel more equitable than everyone's still paying the same flat fee. I'm just thinking that out loud. Okay, so other questions? Walkie, sorry, Walkie had your hand up?
I have a neighbor that I may have, I'm back in my envelope here, less than 3,000 square feet. I bet my neighbor's got 9,000 square feet and his water's dumping into my yard. So I'm like, yeah, maybe if he, that's a personal, like he's got, he's got a 4-car garage, a big driveway, anyway. The other thing, when you're setting this up, can you contract, you talk about hiring people to make this thing work. Can you contract out, hire somebody on a contract basis to set the plan up? And then Rick obviously has somebody that does this work that they can just maintain it as permits come in.
That's a good point. I mean, on any project,
instead of hiring 5 people, just
on any project, that initial implementation is more time consuming, requires more resources, etc. And if you can get past that with some contract help, then maybe get to a steady state that requires less overall hours of support. Margie, you had a comment?
Yeah, can I come out?
Yeah.
I won't take long.
Again, Margie, just focus on the philosophy at this point. We'll talk numbers in a little bit.
Hey, thank you. I am going to try to focus on that first, even though I wasn't even going to look through the rate structures, because I just thought that the $4 million a year or $4.1 million, I just was blown away with that figure. Because specifically in 2017, the figure that HRG came up with was $3.95 million over 5 years. So we've essentially taken $4 million over 5 years. Now these costs are...
We're going to explain the differences that are in the math here that maybe don't reflect what 2017 had. So go to the numbers in a little bit. If you just focus your comments right now on the conversation we just had.
you know how I feel about the budget and how I think we are carrying way too much money. I have 2004, of course that's 18 years ago, but our general fund balance was at about $3 million a year. I mean, even if we went to $6 million a year, we are carrying, 4 times as much as our township policy of reserve or operating reserve, what our policy is. So I don't understand why we're not using the funds that we have to pay for these improvements. I like Ashley made a really good point about these larger ratepayers, and I hope that you would have staff, GIS or HRG, pull out the top 20 property owners in the township with the largest impervious surface, because some of these QBC, Dewey Pile, some of these large employers, large impervious surface, they're going to be paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. So I think if you get the top 20 ratepayers, they have to be notified of this beforehand. They just can't get a bill. So if you're going to go that rate, I would highly suggest that. This whole fee, it just bothers me because I do think it is a tax. Face it, the impervious surface in this township, highways, roads, streets, that's where all the stormwater going into the system is coming from. The stormwater that lands on your roof goes in your gutter, down the drain, it dissipates in your yard. So much of stormwater that falls on your roof never makes it into the drainage system. So this fact that you're saying, these bigger homes with bigger driveways and bigger garages contribute, I believe there were property owners in the borough that had staff out and said, listen, the rain that falls on my roof never makes it into the system. If you have an acre property and you have a house that sits back, you're not using the stormwater system so the whole fee system to me is backwards. I personally would rather somehow incorporate a tax, but as I see that, a tax increase, if it had to be done, if you're going to do it, I know at this point you guys are probably going to do something. So, our property tax right now generates revenue of about $3.7 million. So if you're looking to generate you're doubling taxes. So you're right, you can't, in order to generate that much revenue, you gotta double. You gotta go from 2 mil to 4 mil. That's not gonna fly. So, I don't think I've asked for 7 years. Here's my lovely letter, January 4th, 2015. I've stuck around for 7 years for this one issue. Found many issues along the way that concern me, but, I have a lot of concerns. I'd like to help. I've learned a lot. I've followed the case of the borough. Churches, I got the whole stormwater fee roll from the borough, and when I look through there and see some of these homeowners and some of these businesses and churches, and you're going to be billing yourself, you're going to be billing the school district, you're going to be billing the county. So everybody else that we pay taxes to, they're going to have to raise the taxes because now they got to pay the township fee unless the lawsuit goes in the favor of. It's actually the state, because it's not
state system of higher education.
Right.
The state system of higher education.
Well, the billing from the borough goes to Pennsylvania State. So the
state system of higher education is the party that's appealed it. Okay. The party that's challenging it.
Yeah, and the bill goes to the state of Pennsylvania, so that the state of Pennsylvania is actually saying that this is a fee, is a tax.
State
not
system. It's a separate entity. It's a state system.
Okay. The bills go to the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Anyway, I'd like to talk about the,
Is there any other questions or comments that people have about the approach of taxes, fees, funding stormwater management, a tiered approach in terms of a fee structure? Are there any comments on that specifically? Yes, sir.
Okay, just on the impervious surface, just a general question. My neighborhood is pretty much landscaped to go into a reservoir storm basin, which I believe the property owner owns. Rick, you'd have to, Hamilton Drive, you'd have to tell them that's private or the borough. But just in my, I don't want to speak for my own self. All my drains for my roof go underground into a French drain. So you want to tax me for that rainwater that I'm putting back in the ground. Am I correct? Is that the way this is going? The rain off the roof, you're saying the roof's an impervious surface.
We're saying that there's a substantial...
So I run the water down, put it underground in the French drain underground so it stays there. And that's what I would be taxed on?
In most cases, the only rain that's retained in your underground seepage bed is a 2-year storm. It's about an inch of runoff. So a portion of that, yes, gets infiltrated. The rest of it overflows and sheet flows from the property. That's typical infiltration bed design. And I believe your development does have detention basins which take the water from the road. So it's a combination of water from the house, the driveway, the sidewalks, and the water from your driveways, your sidewalks, and all, they don't go into that infiltration basin.
And it's also the roads in the development. The development wouldn't exist without the roads. The roads in the development have storm inlets that are township owned. So it's also that.
I'm not fighting the road.
No, I'm just saying, but you're only looking at it from your lot. Your
I'm
lot
just
is
looking from a lot, from the way the taxpayer, the individual is going to look at this. That's all.
But to your point, that's a good point. If you've done something or you have something in place there for which you would be eligible to receive a credit.
Okay, that's my question.
That's not correct. Your infiltration
You're saying
bed,
yes, you're saying no.
your infiltration bed is to meet the basic stormwater requirements of our stormwater ordinance, which means, all that means is instead of putting a bigger detention basin in somewhere, some of it's going underground first. So none of that exceeds the current requirements that would allow you to get a credit.
But there's nothing that said I had to do this underground. I could have just run the drain pipe down, let it go off it.
No.
I'm sorry, everybody else in the neighborhood's drain pipe is down into the backyard and it gets off into the
Well,
basement.
if the original land development design had an infiltration bed on your property, then that was a
It
requirement
didn't.
of land development.
I put it in myself.
Okay, well then maybe you do get a credit. Why did you put it in?
That's my question.
But most people don't. Most people have infiltration beds because they're required for the land development.
No, this.
If you went and put one in yourself and improved the stormwater by an infiltration bed or rain guard or some other BMP, then you qualify for a credit.
Okay, that's my question.
And I think there's going to be a lot of residents that are going to have similar questions, that if this does pass, it's something that the township is going to have to.
We're going to have a lot of education, a lot of conversations, a lot of individual situations. So it's going to be.
Can I just say one thing? So I think part of the philosophy of the fee is that right now you just raise the taxes. It's just another line item in your budget. And I'm not suggesting what policy to go with. I'm just telling you as a perspective. If you have it as a fee, people actually be like, wait, what am I paying for? What is the storm drainage system? What does the township have to do with this? There's no awareness if it's just a tax. It's just another line item in your tax to pay for your roads and your whatever. When you do it as a fee, to the point of, hey, maybe I should think about where my water is going from my property and what's getting into the storm drains and how much it costs to maintain it. And maybe I proactively can take measures to reduce that. That's just my thought process when I talk about stormwater drainage to various people. I think that's something to think about.
It's the same way with paying your sewer and your trash. You get the trash truck picking up your trash. I know why that's happening because I'm paying for it through a fee.
How does a fee like this shape development or redevelopment going forward? If, for example,
I don't think it has anything to do with development. I don't think developer cares because they're not ultimately paying the bill. As far as choosing where to live as a resident, potentially, if I had a house in West Whiteland versus West Goshen and West Goshen had a fee and West Whiteland didn't, maybe I would think about it, but probably not.
But a commercial property owner going in and
yeah, a business coming in?
does it,
Right,
Right,
are
yeah.
you going to reconsider how many
Sure.
parking spots and therefore the size of the properties, the size of the buildings that they want to construct? I mean, going forward, is this going to, but then does it also sort of affect when we ask for them to put in sidewalks, whether they're going to, you know? These are all things I think are going to happen.
Sir, could I have your name for the rec? Could I have your name for the
Bob
record?
Scheller, I live in Hamilton Woods, West Goshen Township.
Thank you.
Other public comments on the fee tax situation?
I mean, personally, I'm not necessarily in favor of all this, but if I'd have to do something, I would have to think of more of a four-tier approach. It might cost a little more administratively, but it might be a little fairer to the residents that have less of a footprint than the ones that don't. And I guess one of the other concerns, I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring it up, but so what are we spending now to do this? What is a part of our budget? Is it $1 million? Is it $10 million?
We're going to come to that right in a minute.
Okay. I mean, what's the offset going to be here?
Any other comments on taxes and fees? So we can move, otherwise we'll move on to the numbers piece.
I just want to make a comment regarding what he said is that there is a cost, yes, but there's also a cost for the emergency situations we have right now too, where the pipes are collapsing. And that's an extra cost because it's an emergency situation. So that's why we're trying to get ahead of this to avoid any more emergency situations.
Sir, your name for the record?
Steve Crum.
Okay, so let's keep the conversation going, but this time talk about the analysis that HRG did relative to a stormwater program budget. So I think there are two great questions that I've heard, and I certainly want to explore them myself. One is we have a relatively significant, I'll call it surplus, in our general fund that we've maintained or has grown over several years. Despite having budgets that sometimes don't always balance as we go into the year, we seem to end up with surpluses that continue to grow the general fund. So in terms of available funds to deal with projects that may be limited because once you fix them they should be solved, like corrugated metal pipe, there is a question around how much of that type of investment could be funded out of existing balances that the township has. And then the second point that I heard was just raised was a good one, which is, well, we've managed stormwater issues up to this point out of the budgets that we've had in public works. So we have staff that fix pipes that break, we have staff that deal with emergencies and projects that come up that need to be done because we know the particular stormwater system's failing, and we pay for projects out of our capital program as well. So I don't know if people have this specific information in front of them. It was in the public materials for the meeting. But if you look at the analysis that HRG has done, it shows that in 2022 at least, the operating expenses, which is, if you remember, was one of the things I mentioned was one of the five, shows that we, currently in our budget, we're probably spending about $1,062,500 out of what we do today, the revenues we collect, to fund the kind of things that we talked about, I've just talked about. So when we look at this $4 million a year, we'll call it, that HRG has done in this analysis, maybe $1 million of that is really already sustained from our existing revenue sources. And then this analysis also goes on to show these three or four other areas that I talked about. So it shows the need to continue to invest in equipment that's needed to come up to full compliance with our MS4 permit in terms of inlet cleaning and inspection and road sweeping. So there is a growth in that public works budget. Then there is this ongoing repair and reconstruction projects, which has a kind of baseline of $100,000 to $200,000 of cost in there. assuming the same kind of issues that we've experienced in recent years continue. It shows the fact that we have to pay for our PRP projects. Those are the MS4 permit required projects, and there's a kind of a significant amount of money here through the remaining period of this permit that has to pay for the $2 to $3 million associated with those projects. And then there's another line item associated with what's called debt service, and that is because, to my point about the corrugated metal pipe, the HRG analysis of what priority projects should be addressed now rather than waiting for the system to fail and spending even more money on them. There's an assumption in this analysis that we do a capital program, borrow some money, and then pay off the debt over whatever it is, 10 or 15 years that we borrowed the money for. So if you add all those up, you get to this kind of $4 million range, of which $1 million, if you like, as I said at the beginning, is a base load of costs that we're currently absorbing. So those are my thoughts when I looked at these numbers in terms of how this stacks up. I'm not going to try to compare it, Margie, to 2017 and what people said was important there. I'm pretty damn sure that there was no CMP on HRG's radar back then in terms of a failing system. This doesn't include anything in terms of these neighborhoods that have come to us and said, I've got sheet water running off all my neighbors' properties into my yard. What can we do about it? So the world moves on and the numbers are what they are. I do personally feel this $4 million a year is more than is needed to start a stormwater program. These costs are probably conservative. That's what engineers do. That's what we tend to think of, worst case. And things can not maybe cost as much, maybe not as near its end of life as some of these things might appear at the time we put the money in. So I do think there's some really hard look at what we need to actually fund. I do think the base amount, if we're going to move that into a stormwater fee, then that should mean that taxes go down, right? So we have to be careful about what we include in a stormwater fee. We have to make sure it's legally defensible. We have to manage what we think is the way this program would build up and be sustainable over time, and not include just a big amount of money up front because we know we've got some infrastructure problems that can be addressed in the next 5 years, but then hopefully will go away for some time. So those are my initial thoughts around it. Board, what's your thinking?
Just a question on the Penvest loan for the replacement of the CMP pipe. What is the amount of that loan amount, the face amount? Do you have any idea what that will be? How would they come up with these figures for the debt service otherwise? They have to know what that would be.
Yeah. I don't have it in front of me, so unless Chris, they notified you.
No, I don't, but I think that's based on an estimate of the analysis of the CRP piping through and the estimated replacement cost to move to HDPE pipe. Because they're about, I believe, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were about a third of the way through the corrugated metal pipe analysis, I believe.
Okay, so
we don't have the answer to that, John.
We don't have an answer to that.
We should be able to get it because this is a spreadsheet, so it's good enough.
And we're looking at a 10-year capital improvement plan then for that loan. The rates there, I question the rates there that they're citing here also. I think they're going to be higher than that.
The rates for what? Sorry, John.
Well, on the payback on the Penvest loan.
Oh, yeah.
They're saying 1.73% for years 1 through 5. I get a feeling, well, if we ever get doing it, it could be higher than that, but anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just be curious to know what the loan amount is they're figuring out.
Okay.
I had a question if we know if these amounts include contingencies, 10%, 20%. We know that.
They included it in another part of this.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if it's included, because that's important.
Yeah, it's right there.
It adjusts for delinquencies.
It's right there as well. So I have a general question. So it says assumes 370,000 feet of pipe. Is that an accurate number of how much the CMP?
So that line item there is a ongoing operational activity that Public Works does with back truck inspection, cleaning, checking out. It says that's the size of a program you have to be in compliance with your permit.
I know, I guess I'm just trying to look at this sort of from like an aerial perspective, this whole project. How much piping do we have? How much needs to be replaced? What's the total cost of that?
Well, we know how much piping we have, and we have about 30,000 linear feet of CMP that either needs to be lined or replaced. So we actually have pretty accurate numbers.
So 30,000 feet of CMP that needs to be replaced.
Yep.
How much does that cost to replace?
I can't give you a number on that. I have no idea.
We have a 160-foot project at,
$20,000 just for the piping.
yeah,
Okay, so do
It's a lot.
Well, we just did the Ravens Lane project. How many feet was that? About 1,000 feet or something like that?
about that.
And how much did that come to, the final cost?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't have it.
$1.5 billion?
No.
No, just 400, in the 400 range, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was
Okay.
400,000 for 1,000 feet. And you're saying we have 30,000.
That
It's not just the cost
that
of the
was
pipe.
very
It's a
large
lot of
pipe.
things, yeah.
That was a really big pipe.
And it's not just the cost of the pipe, it's the cost of all the
Ongoing
material and ongoing maintenance and inspection.
Certain things you have to give to property owners,
That's true, but
any
what's the,
easements, things like that.
what's the bulk of this fee on each hour?
All these costs on this sheet here.
Yeah, everything that's on the,
Which is mostly,
2.8 million of public works normal operation, 2.6 million of public
operating expenses.
operating expenses.
It's not actual replacement of pipe.
No, that's just maintaining, street sweeping program, inspecting, cleaning out inlets.
It's legal services, mapping, auditing,
Yeah.
general operating costs.
advertising, conferences.
But most of it actually is two bottom lines, cleaning and inspection and salary and wages of staff.
Can you touch on that salary and wages of staff? That's an awful lot of money. How many staff?
So it's $2 million, so how many people is that?
Well, it's
But
a
what does the
percent,
staff do?
it's a percentage of existing staff and then new staff just to manage the stormwater system, just to manage the stormwater utility and system. So it's part of my salary, Rick's salary, Jamie's salary, Dave's salary. So it's a portion of it. Just like how things are allocated between, like the general fund and the sewer fund, based on
But that's to the point of these costs are already being paid for. They're reallocated to stormwater, and the taxes should be going down.
Yeah.
Well, they're not all already allocated. We are not doing anywhere near what we are required by law to do. Not even close. We've got $4 million of PRP, TMDL projects that we haven't even started to pay for yet that need to be done within the next 5 years. We need a back truck to do work that we've been mandated to do since 2003 that we just haven't done or do by hand, which is inadequate. We now have one street sweeper to do the work that's required, but we really need two because of the amount of roads we have. There's a ton of stuff that's not getting done that we're mandated by law to do. So there's going to be a little bit of replacement, but not a great deal. We really need to ramp up this program to meet the unfunded mandates that have been brought down by the state and EPA. And I'd also like to point out that there are specific new stormwater staff included in this proposal, primarily a sub-crew within Public Works to do only stormwater. Because we can't clean 3,000 to 4,000 inlets a year without having a dedicated staff. And that's not just cleaning, it's cleaning the inlets, the pipes, maintaining the inlets, rebuilding the inlets. You know, there's a ton of maintenance work in there. So
I know, but yeah.
there's replacement, there's maintenance, and there's MS4 requirements. All three of those areas are in here and need to be done.
I understand that. Again, there's not, in my opinion, there's not enough information here yet to say what is behind this, the numbers in the spreadsheet. We need to dig into this in a lot more detail. So it's a starter for 10, but it needs a lot more information. So again, if you look at the 22 line, it says there's $1 million of costs we're already spending on stormwater that were absorbed without any fee in place. So there's plenty of questions to be answered, and we don't have enough information to really explore it in detail today. I do think, again, that this is a little bit on the conservative side in terms of where the costs are headed, in terms of the program to address what we need to do. But
Just
that's my
like,
opinion.
just like I just follow up to that point there, we're, as far as getting information, HRD is supposedly also developing an analysis of that 30,000 feet of CMP and prioritizing what areas need to be replaced. Where are we at as far as that goes? Do you have any idea?
I think they're probably about 50% through that project right now.
Okay.
We can't actually completely finish it because we don't have all the data because the Army Corps hasn't completed that work that was supposed to complete that project, and probably won't be completed now until next year. But they are underway, they are doing work. We know, just by default and experience, some of the really bad areas that we need to deal with first. So the work that HRG is doing to prioritize the 30,000 linear feet is very important, and we do need a priority program to approach long term. But if we had the funding, we could start to work on critical CMP pipe tomorrow, because we've already been doing it with emergency projects for the last couple of years. So yes, the study is needed. Yes, the study will be beneficial, but this program, starting this program, should not hinge on when that study's done. We already know where we've got some really bad issues that need to be fixed even without that study.
How communicative has DEP been with us and other municipalities about meeting those expectations that they're putting out with the MS Corps?
It's not good.
So they haven't really been following up with us on what we're doing or even inquiring as to what we're doing.
No.
It just makes one question, why we are being controlled by the DEP when they're not even involved. I have difficulty trying to light a fire under our residents to fund something that, yes, look, I'm not arguing that we have a failing stormwater system. That's a fact. People from all over the township have been in the audience saying, I need my, I'm having issues in my yard, and people putting additions on and patios that now, run into their neighbors' properties, and it's an issue. At the same time, I haven't seen any evidence from the DEP that this MS4, that it's such a, an emergency situation that we need to meet it.
We have a permit that requires you though. So you have a permit in place now that has, as Rick was saying, obligations to meet. What you're saying is you haven't seen the DEP come to cite you for not complying with the permit. And the question is, do you wait till that happens and then what do you do? Because you haven't had any funding in place. I think that's and some municipalities, I'll tell you right now, some municipalities are kicking the can and saying, when DEP comes after us, we'll deal with it.
It's too late.
And
I think we're doing that.
There are also a
Absolutely.
number of municipalities in Lancaster County that a couple of years ago got massive EPA and DEP fines for non-compliance when they were audited.
When was that?
About 3 or 4 years ago.
So,
Would that also potentially create a consent order? It would have to be.
They did have consent.
For non-compliance?
Yeah. They got fined and they were required
A consent order.
to do consent.
And we don't want to go down that road. It's an
I
ugly
know,
road.
but we are also living in a different reality right now, okay? Like, the price of property, prices are rising, inflation is happening, people have lost jobs. There's an economic reality that's happening beyond what we're looking at right here that was not the case when the DEP was getting on everybody to meet these specifications. And what I'm saying is that they're not coming knocking on our door because...
The problem is the law hasn't changed.
I know that, but what I'm saying is that they aren't even showing up to work.
I completely agree with everything that you were saying.
So I don't really think that they are going to come to us and knock on wood, because if I'm wrong, then yes, I will eat my hat. But what I'm saying is, there's a way to plan for these things responsibly, and I don't think that involves debt, and I don't think that it involves being intimidated by the DEP into doing something when clearly we are making wise choices to move in that direction. I'm not saying that I'm against the fee. I'm just saying I don't want to be sort of controlled like a puppet by them in this situation.
just on the debt question, I do support fixing the CMP because, as we know, it will be a lot more expensive if it fails to fix than if we can get it there and line it. So I hear Rick's point that we can get on with some things now, and we really need to do very similar approaches to what we did with the sewer authority, where we know there's a lot of stuff that needed fixing and upgrading. We borrowed some money and invested it and got a real nice system now. And I think the CMP does require us to Marge's point, probably dig into some of this money that's sitting in the general fund, Rick. If you want to get on with some projects, let's talk about the priority ones, and we'll draw down the general fund balance and fix them now. But once we get the full HRG assessment, and if it's $8 to $10 million of investment needed to fix 30,000 feet, then I'm fine going and borrowing 4 or 5 to go fix it, because I don't want to spend 10 when it collapses and we've got Ravens lanes all over the place.
Well, that was my question, about doing this in pieces. Really getting that hard number, and we have 30,000 feet of the metal piping that needs to be replaced. So let's get a number on that, look in our general fund, see how much that's going to cost. Plan for that over the next couple of years. We can find the money for that piece, and then in the meantime, we buy the vac truck the 1 year. It doesn't all have to be compiled into this massive overhaul of a project if we can start attacking this corrugated metal piping in pieces now, just get on it already, just do it.
And we are doing it. We actually have 3 projects lined up for this year that we're paying out of the American Rescue Plan Act funds.
Right.
The only problem with that is those are all emergencies, which are very expensive. We got to get ahead. We got to put the fires out and then get ahead of the game so we can do lining and limited replacement instead of all replacement.
And what I'm saying is that the emergency situation is the piping. The emergency situation is not the street sweeping. The emergency situation is not all this other stuff that they're saying needs to be done. The emergency situation is the actual holes that are opening up in the street. And so what we need to do is, yes, we need to get ahead of it. But why throw money at all of these other things when we could be putting it all in the piping and then...
Well, back to Rick and Chris's point, piping is our problem. DEP doesn't care about that. That's our infrastructure that's failed. We should have been fixing it much earlier or sooner than we were addressing it. They're going to say, why haven't you done your PRP projects? And where are you with cleaning out all your inlets from all that grit from the last 50 years that's accumulated? And we'll go, well, we're not doing it because we don't want to do it. I mean, we have to decide how
our
we're going to...
reasoning. I'm sorry. Our reasoning is, I'm sorry, have you been showing up to work? No. Okay. What are we doing? We're working with the money that we have that we're collecting from our tax base and trying to keep our community afloat while also improving a system that's failing. So I'm sorry, if they have something to say about that and they want to throw our township into economic collapse, then I actually will take them to court over that. Hi. May I comment, please?
Well, let's just finish the board. So, Robin, Tina, we haven't heard much from you guys. What do you think about the overall approach to funding stormwater improvement? Do you like the idea of, Rick, come up with the priority projects you already know about in CMP, and let's look at what we have as a balance in the general fund and start spending some of that excess?
Absolutely.
I think the idea too.
We should start doing that. If the money's there, I think we should prioritize and look at that.
And maybe pull out CMP out of this fee analysis then.
Yeah, and redo it, and then see what the actual cost is going to be in the tier or the redo it.
John, would you
Because that's
support
gonna
that?
take $2 million off it.
I think we already just had some discussion prior, in other meetings about coming up with some projects that need to be addressed at this point. And if you're ready to do that this year.
We can do that.
Okay, so that's an action plan, Chris. Great. Looking for you to come up with the priorities on the CMP and talk to us about the total cost to do it. And we'll talk about funding it from the general fund.
Do we have the staff to do that, Ray, this year?
Carol will do it.
Well, I think the basic top priorities Dave and I can work out, but yeah, we're going to need consultant help to get it. And we're, like I said, we still need to continue the HRG project because once we get the absolute big fires put out, we need to prioritize what the top projects are after that, so we line rather than replace wherever we can.
And that's where we're trying to grab our hands around it, getting some of a long-term capital improvement project here, so, and what this project will consist of. And if we can move HRG along in this process, we need that information as quickly as possible.
Well, they are moving along, and like I say, the problem that they're going to run into when they run out of data is that we're dependent on the Army Corps of Engineers to get us that last 20% of data.
Right, I think they got 80% of it
We still
done.
can get a good handle on it.
They can at least give us an overview of that 80%.
Well, let's keep going with the approach that, Ashley just suggested. So, Rick, you have a plan that continues to invest, a pay-as-you-go plan for the PRP projects, right? We're doing design work, and we'll be spending money on the actual projects construction-wise over the next 2, 3, 4 years, right?
If you budget for that.
And we have been budgeting for it.
You have for some of the designs. We haven't gotten to construction on any of them yet.
Yeah, so
the designs are not nearly as costly as the construction. So again, these costs are going to escalate as we go along. But yes, we are budgeted to start 2 more basin designs and a stream bank restoration this year. And the intent is to start those designs.
So we'll get the designs done, and then we go to the budget for 23. We'll look at our revenue situation, which seems to be pretty stable and robust and ahead of where we expect it to be. So it looks like we can fund the construction projects for that, for the 23-24 time frame. DEP did come in. Heck, we've done most of our project work. We've got a street sweeper. We're fixing our own CMP. Sounds a good place, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, you're correct. DEP doesn't give a rip about our CMP, but the rest of it's a good point. And we also have the 2 ME2 fine projects that we're completing this year. So we intend to submit them for PRP credit. And we're also going to be retrofitting the basin, the current emergency project that we're doing now, and which we also think might be able to be credited to Spring Valley, or credited to the PRPs. So we're kind of trying to maximize our impact with the emergency and get something out of it.
Okay. All right, so board, we've had our piece here. Comments from folks?
I just think it was great discussion, and as far as the hard infrastructure, I like that you're going to just focus on that, because that's obviously what needs to be done. Some of these stormwater basins that spending $250,000, they're not going to make a difference. They're just not going to make a difference with anything. So, like we said, DEP comes a knock-in. We've spent, what, $28 million on our sewer system to reduce and the suites. We're doing this stuff, but some of these other stream bank restorations and stormwater, that's all on private property anyway. When I went to Norristown and sat with the water guy, he said the fact that we had to do this is because everybody thumbed their nose and did nothing. So now we're making everybody come up with a plan. If we come in and we see that a township didn't do anything for years and is doing something now, they're going to be satisfied. And as a citizen, I sit here and ask, why do we have staff that's been here for 20 years and the previous manager for 15 years and public works people? Why was it ignored for all these years? And then why now do you come to the citizens to have to fund it? It should have been done.
Well, the issue was a new mandate, a new law requiring reduction in pollutants that didn't exist. So you could ask the question, why did the state legislatures decide that was important? And I'm not weighing in on either side of it.
Right.
But it's not necessarily a township issue.
Most of it is
okay, other questions? Okay, so boy, let's do a wrap on this and see where we are. I'll give it a go. So what I heard was we've had a good debate around the whole fee tax structure. We had a couple of data points we were required to get. Kristen had a follow-up about something, I forget what it is.
I have it written down.
You have it written down. Hopefully Chris has got it written down. Tiered approach in terms of a fee option was generally, I heard from most of the board, was a more supportive approach. When we got into the numbers about a stormwater fee, There's a lot of questions about the kind of analysis that HRG had done. Again, as I said, I think it's more of a starter at this point. What we did recognize was that as we think through what additional work needs to be done by the township here around the determination of, for example, the public works costs and investment in equipment, etc., we felt the priority really in the near term was to go after what we know is failing infrastructure, which is the CMP piping. Rick, we're asking you to come up with the, based on what you've seen from HRG and what you already know with Dave, come up with the priority projects, and let's have a conversation about the balance that we have in the general fund as being a way to accelerate getting on top of that. And we also talked about the PRP projects being keep doing what we're doing. We're doing design work this year, and we expect that some of the revenue flows that we have will allow us to execute those projects within the permit timeline. Is that a reasonable summary of where we ended up?
Very good. That's a lot of work.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. I want to move on to something else. Any last comments? Okay, let's talk about agenda item number 9, discussion and possible approval of the purchase of an online registration. 8. I skipped it, I'm sorry. Discussion regarding a stormwater feasibility report for proposed splash pad in West Goshen Community Park. Chris.
Mr. Chairman, at the February 15th meeting, the board approved a proposal from Carroll Engineering to complete a stormwater feasibility study for potential construction of a splash pad in West Goshen Community Park. The testing was conducted on March 15th with 2 sites in the park being utilized. The study focused on detention and infiltration capability of the site soils to determine if a slow release facility was feasible for the site. Based on the results, it was determined that the existing northeastern basin was suitable for modifications to accommodate the discharge from the splash pad. The report also outlines potential locations for the splash pad, the concept for the existing basin, and a cost estimate for this site work. The estimate that was included for the stormwater components for the site improvements was $186,000. Which includes a 20% contingency to account for any additional unknowns, mobilization, bonding, insurance. Survey design and bidding would be 15%, and the site work project total was estimated at just under $214,000. We had budgeted $500,000 in the capital reserve fund budget for this project. So based on these results, and I'll ask Rick if he has any further analysis on the results from the study, the next step in this process would be to have Carroll Engineering prepare a proposal to do the site design work for the board's consideration. And I have contacted General Recreation for an updated cost estimate to include the items that were previously discussed. Rick, was there anything in the analysis?
No, I did review the analysis. 2 of the test pits within the existing basin turned out to infiltrate very well. 3 inches per hour is a decent infiltration rate. It's not marginal in any respect. The other one was basically 0, but 2/3 of the basin looks to be good. I think
is that enough data points for that size of a basin? There's a pretty big area.
Typically, for a basin that size, you would do 2 to 3 tests. That is reasonable. One thing I think you need to keep in mind too, though, is if we turn that basin into an infiltration facility, we cannot use it for recreational activity. You cannot have any further compaction of that soil with baseball or t-ball or whatever the heck else happens there. Along with the infiltration that's going to be put in there, the basin should be naturalized and kept in a naturalized condition to maximize the porosity of the soil and make sure that it's going to continue to function further.
How's it used today? Is it used for anything other than just open space?
T-ball.
T-ball.
There's 2 T-ball fields back there because there's nowhere else to put.
They would go away.
Yep.
Don't we have baseball fields on the other side?
Everything is booked. I mean, they're booked. The Henderson North fields are booked. Every field we have, every field the school district has, there's no fields for these kids.
But here's the other thing I'd like to throw out. Even if you don't do this infiltration facility and don't build a splash pad, having any activity in a stormwater basin that causes compaction is a really, really bad idea.
Exactly. Who does stormwater basin?
It's not your typical stormwater basin. It's at almost the highest point in the park. It's not really taking any flow from the parking lots, anything of that.
Well, we have more baseball fields in this township. And is that like a normal thing? I mean, we really do. There's one in my front yard, literally, and two in my neighborhood, and there's two behind me.
And everyone is booked. We get more calls than we can possibly put.
Well, they shouldn't be in the basin anyway. Right?
Correct. Okay, other questions on the data? Is there any other concerns about the ability of the property to manage the water off the proposed splash pad?
Let me ask you a question. Woody, let me throw this at you. If the board decides to go ahead with this project, would there be any part of this possibly that we could be doing it in-house, such as the installation of that 8-inch perforated pipe in the basin area?
I would, for time, you've got the basketball court right there, that a project needs to be done. You've got the community bathroom to go in. This should all be one process with one contractor with his subs. We have plenty of other things going on. There's storm pipe everywhere, there's patching, there's 6 weeks of road bank mowing. I mean, our guys are busy on a routine basis.
Okay, so your recommendation, make it all one package then?
I would do all one package, do it all together. We have one mess in, it gets cleaned up on the way out. There's one access point for all the projects. Plus you're looking at a project of that scope. You're probably not going to have summer camp up there that summer.
Would the playground still be open and usable in the amphitheater while this is happening?
Playground could be, the amphitheater's in question because of where all the activity is. You're going to have the community family bathroom construction. So it's probably going to take at least the men's room down while that's going on. So the amphitheater would be in question.
So the total cost of the project, is it within the scope of our budget altogether? I know we said $500,000 for the splash pad, but now we have the bathroom and the basketball court.
We have the unknowns, the mobilization, demobilization, the bonds, the insurance, the survey, that's another 50%.
You're not going to know the full cost of the project until you go out to bid.
Yeah,
You'll understand what the cost of the materials are, and Carol can give us a good estimate on what it's going to be, but you're not going to have a full idea. And this is going to be more of a 23, potentially 24 project at this point, so there's time for the board to reevaluate the cost. And I also think, like I wrote in my memo, I think that this is a very good potential grant funding project through both state and county resources that we could look at.
Do you have money in your open space fund that you collect from Saldo?
Yeah, that's what we're
Is that where you're going to pay with it?
Yeah.
And we have money in restricted parks that we were planning to utilize
Are
towards
they
this as well.
different? Open space and restricted park?
I was thinking restricted parks, but we
It's the same.
It's the same.
But you said capital reserve fund.
That's where it was allocated in the budget, in the capital reserve fund budget.
I thought we were taking it all out of the parks fund.
Well, that's where the money would come from, but in terms of the budgeting of the 6 months, it's in the capital reserve
Yeah,
fund.
we have that conversation where it goes.
Well, yeah.
So I've got a question for Dave. If we decide that given the overall cost, and we do need to come up with at least an order of magnitude estimate on this, so an actual estimated cost for it, even though we don't know exactly what it will be until we go to bid. If we decide as a board that, look, it could more than likely suck up everything we've got in restricted parks, and we really want to make sure we get some substantial grant funding before we commit to going forward with it, and that puts it in this 23 or even 24 time frame. Are the basketball courts going to survive that long?
We've done some patching on it, we're going to keep patching.
Okay. So you would rather wait for two years if necessary and do it all in one go versus do the basketball courts?
Yeah, because you're going to make such a mess to go in there and do the basketball courts. Then you're going to get that reestablished. Then we're going to go back in and tear that same area back up again.
So So right now, the estimate that you're looking at between what General Rec provided last September plus what was in Chris Peterson's memo, that was $526,000.
And does that include site improvements and construction and engineering design and engineering project oversight? Because I want to make sure they're all included in that.
Well, that estimate includes that's the estimate from the memo, which based on what Chris wrote was assumed to be 15%. Detailed estimate can be provided in the future for these services once the project scope has been finalized. As such, the site work project total is estimated to be $213,900.
And that includes the construction, engineering design, and project oversight.
It includes additional unknowns, mobilization, demobilization, bonds, insurance, survey, design, bidding, and construction inspection.
So I'm assuming it includes that then because they're only excluding 15%.
Correct. So that's just an estimate, and I'm waiting for, as the Vice Chair pointed out earlier, inflation is going on, waiting for an updated cost estimate for general recreation, which I'm expecting to be higher than the $312,000. Plus, we had talked about incorporating the shade structure, so I asked for a cost difference between both a cloth and metal shade structure, just so the board can see the difference. We talked about adding some benches. We talked about, I believe we also talked about some shade trees as well. So I'm waiting for an updated cost estimate on that. But I think for right now, I don't think the overall size in terms of the actual pad is going to change. So if the board wanted to get another estimate from Carroll Engineering to do the actual site design work, that would be the next step in the process.
If we made this an all one-time project, including the basketball courts and other things of that nature in this design, would that negatively impact the ability to apply for any grants for the splash pad?
I actually think it may make it more advantageous because, Jamie's kind of nodding her head, or nodding, like wavering back and
It
forth.
just depends on what grant funding that you're going for. DCNR caps it at $250,000, but they want you to have a 50% match. So you're at that point. Adding the basketball courts would only increase probably your out of pocket, but it also makes more sense to do it all at one time. You're going to get a better bid and
the one thing I'm thinking about, not to interrupt, the one thing I'm thinking about is DCNR, the county actually might look at the basketball courts more as maintenance as opposed to, they may, more as maintenance.
What about the restroom addition?
Maybe more as maintenance as well. Just because it's an existing structure, you can always, doesn't hurt to ask.
My bottom line, so what I'm thinking here is, look, you go up to, I live in Lambert Park, I go up there, I went up there a weekend or two ago, it was chilly and the wind was whipping around, and there were people in that dog park and kids all over the skate park. People like the amenities in these parks, and I really think a splash pad in the summer would be great for the younger kids. I do think we've accumulated a substantial amount of money, over $1 million in our restricted parks fund to fund this. The T-ball thing was a bit of a out of left field. I didn't realize we'd taken something away potentially there. But I was definitely on the page of keeping moving this forward. I really think we should get a grant application so we don't spend every last penny out of our restricted parks to execute a splash pad project. But I would support having Carroll Engineering come up with an estimate to do the design work at this point. What were the other board members think?
They designed, I want a total cost. Maybe she would do total construction, on-site, project management, everything included, to get the full picture, what it is, but I agree.
And the splash pad or all three?
The whole thing.
The whole thing. Because it's going to,
all coming out
money,
the same.
I don't want surprises.
So you'd rather have the estimate before you commit to doing the design work?
I would.
But we're all asking for an estimate of the design work. Get where we are with this.
See, I don't know if they can, they give us an estimate on everything without doing the design first. I don't think so.
survey.
Yeah, they're gonna at least have to go out and survey and shoot topography.
Which is what we need anyway.
For the design, for the estimate. I mean, I can ask Carol to include, when they do their design, a full construction cost estimate as part of their proposal.
We should be able to do it.
Yeah.
I was hearing too, that you don't want them to do detailed design until you've got a good handle on is it going to be 800,000, a million, 1.2, what is the actual kind of
We can do a ballpark, but
Yeah,
I
you can do
think
a
it's not
ballpark.
how reliable it is.
We don't have that number in front of us, we're
Yeah.
kind of picking numbers at the
I feel like I
moment.
don't have the full picture.
But it's gonna be a question of how reliable is the data going to be.
I'm sorry.
It's gonna be a question of how reliable is the data going to be.
But at least we would have a basis for the board to make a decision. Hey,
Right.
here's the engineer's best probable estimate of cost. Even if we know things are going to change and, and whatever else, it's okay. I just need to know what's the total picture look like. Now, based on that, we would probably, hopefully would feel we could authorize to start the design work.
Yeah, I feel better about it knowing what I'm getting into from a cost standpoint to budget that.
Yeah.
So from an action item perspective, what I can do is I can ask for cost estimate for the work for the splash pad, the basketball courts, the bathrooms, and then a proposal to do the design work for the board's consideration. Okay.
A fully developed estimate, to Tina's point,
Separate.
including all construction cost oversight and all the rest of it.
Design work for the bathroom as well.
It's going to be one project. So.
Carol's
That's
the
what-
one.
that's
They
what
want
I
to be
looked at.
architects.
We have to
Carol's already looked into it, they're pretty close with it. This has been an ongoing, we've been down this road 6-7 times over the last few years.
For the bathroom?
Yeah, for a family bathroom. It's been requested multiple times, we've been trying to get it in.
Let's make sure their estimate to do the design work
It's gonna need to be,
reflected that.
it's gonna need to be looked at again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're changing it.
It's not just bad. All right. So that's it, you're right, Chris, that was the action.
Okay. I will contact them for that.
But is there any public comments on this? Just don't want to have it all before it is.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, but what are the annual maintenance costs going to be? We've got to hire the guy. You got pumps, you got...
There's no pumps.
Oh, there's no pumps?
It's all water pressure. We went through the kind of conversation before around whether there's a collection system, whatever else. It's kind of all once through. It's activated by the user, so it's not flowing all the time. It's certain months of the year. There's obviously winterization at some point. And when we talk to the actual vendor for the splash pad itself, the ongoing maintenance of the pad is relatively minor to do with a few fixtures and fittings. So it should be a low maintenance add to amenities. Okay.
And is there a liability to this that we have to be careful of?
We check
Same
over
liability.
Same liability we have now.
Okay, no, water, I mean, it's a water feature, I don't know how deep it is. or
No,
whatever.
it's-
No, that's why we wouldn't want to add a pool.
Yes, it's not as significant of a concern as if we had a community pool.
Okay.
Sean?
Doug?
Has there been any consideration about thinking for putting this in the new drying park? Would there be any cost savings with less stormwater?
There's no active park as part of that amenity.
It's all passive.
It's all passive. There's no active component to that facility.
Nothing planned.
Nothing planned. There's
Yeah.
no. It's all envisioned to be pad, walking trails, pavilions, things like that.
You're talking about.
That was the plan, but you said someone from Park and Rec.
Well, the other thing is that the community park has a playground there as well, so it's a great combination.
And the, what's it called, pavilion.
Margie?
Yeah, off topic a little bit, but it was brought up about the baseball fields. I've often wondered, do we charge a user's fee or rental on those fields? Where does that go?
Yes, we do.
What fund does that go into?
I mean, it goes into it's through the general fund to take care of the maintenance of the fields. Dave, you would probably know more about that than I
Yeah,
do.
it probably goes, I don't have it in front of me, through the Parks Department, plus some of the field, like the Henderson North fields, we actually pay the school district to use those. We pay them a maintenance fee for the leagues to use them, so the leagues pay us.
Yeah, I was just surprised to learn that some of these organizations pay $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year to rent Okay, I've just never seen that line item in our budget. I skipped over that one. So, thank you.
If you shoot Christine an email, I'm sure she'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. If I skip over another one. Number 9, hearing number 9, discussion and possible approval of the purchase of online registration software for the Park and Rec Department. And if I can find that. Chris.
Mr. Chairman, I'm actually going to defer to Mr. Lear because he has done the bulk of the research and analysis on this endeavor.
Yeah, I had forwarded it to the supervisors and to Mr. Bashir. Just an outline of some of the research that the Finance Department and the Park and Recreation Department has done. The bottom line is that we have looked at numerous Park and Recreation departments as well as rec-rare companies that they have used and are recommending that we look at pursuing Civic Rec for implementation of registration software. We would use about a 6-month window to sit down, meet with them, go over all of our needs, go over our design vision with them, have them customize the software for West Goshen Township. They would then provide the training for staff members, and that would be 2 levels of training. The administrators, who would be Tom Steins and myself, as well as other staff who would do entry. And we would beta test it and hopefully have it ready by the end of the year.
In time for Santa.
That's what the hope would be.
Well, just some comments from me to kick it off. I mean, I do remember when we selected Civic Plus from the website, that one of the features of why they were selected was that they did have these other packages that could be bolted on and give additional functionality, you know, I guess like Civic Rec. So it's good that it would be from the same vendor, if you like, that we've used for our website. So we're not talking about someone, we're dealing with someone who's a known entity to us in terms of their capability. If I recall right, actually, I know you're involved with Derek a little bit. That project seemed to go pretty well in terms of support from them and their efforts to do the rollout. So I think that's a good positive in selecting the Civic Rec package. Ken's given us the timeline. My understanding came from your email was that this basically will support all the the Parks and Recs programs that require registration. There wouldn't be anything that would be too convoluted or complex to not be able to access what this...
That is correct, and that was one of the reasons why we also wanted to go in that direction. Civic Rec, their software does have a lot of flexibility. So we could use it for not just things that are paid, but things where currently people don't pay. For example, the egg hunt. We ask people to register for that. They'd be able to do that and be able to compile the data for us. Even if people aren't necessarily paying for something like that.
It would also handle like the waivers, not just the registration and paying. It would also be able to do a waiver form.
That's correct. It would, in addition to the money component, it would do all the record keeping that we would want, which would include the waivers or really any other record keeping that we need, which especially would come in handy for the summer recreation program.
So if it's a situation with like a finite number of seats or availability, it'll cut it off?
Correct. It would cut it off when it reaches that limit, and it would start to build a standby list in numerical order so that if someone did cancel, then we could go to the next person on the list and so forth. It would do that automatically for us.
For the payment, what's the percentage that the person would have to pay if it's a credit card?
I'm sorry?
Through this system?
Oh, yeah. The software itself would not have a per-use fee. That would be a subscription basis. Now, the credit card processor would have a fee. They work with 4 different credit card companies primarily. They can work with really any credit card company, but there are 4 that they recommend that they are pretty much set up seamlessly to work with. Those fees typically run in about the 3% range.
So you would either tack it on to the total price of the...
We could do it one of 2 ways. We either increase the price to include that fee, or when they check out, it says, okay, here's the administrative fee.
When we did the online bill paying recently for the trash and sewer bills, that was kind of integrated with Munis. This would be more standalone in terms of so the finance department would have to manage the receipt of the payments transfer it into the appropriate accounts within Munis, correct?
That is the expectation, that Christine would be able to set up reports so that when the money comes in, it is automatically coded, depending upon what that particular transaction is, to match what her Munis input would be, so that the report would automatically just generate straight up for her to know what's coming in where.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Any questions from the board? Questions?
Well, I just want to say this. I've heard from a number of residents, not that this is the most highest priority on their list of things that should be done here in the township, but it's definitely one of the things I've heard people say, why don't we have this ability to do this? So I think this is well past due, and it's time for us to get on with it. So I would support making a recommendation for, I believe you're recommending Civic Rec as the provider here, so I would make that motion.
Okay, so John's making a motion to authorize proceeding with the procurement of Civic Rec as our online registration software tool for the Park and Rec Department. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
John, is there a dollar amount in your recommendation?
Well, the dollar amount he already has laid out here, but I do want to, the caveat would be, you say you can negotiate the price.
We addressed that. We emphasized in our demo with them that we are currently Civic Plus customers, and with that, enable us to take advantage of any kind of discount. And he certainly, while not committing to a dollar amount, left the door open that yes, they can do a discount for people who are already Civic Plus customers.
So how do you amend that motion?
Do we do a not to exceed, or do we just leave it at the negotiation of the township manager and Parks and Rec?
I would leave it at the negotiation of staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to commend Ken and Tom and Holly and Christine for all their work on this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate
You
it.
did your homework.
Yeah.
Ken took the lead on it and
We'll
did a
be
good job.
very happy. Thank you for being so thorough.
Well, thank you, but I think we'll be happy too. I think it'll be good for the staff as well as for the public. And as John said earlier, something well past due, so thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion from John. Is there a second? Give it a second. Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on the motion?
Two questions. First one, what is the dollar amount? And the second question is, will the public still be able to register manually without a computer?
Yes, let me ask you the first question, then we'll go to the second one from the team. So there's an implementation fee that was quoted in Ken's memo of $12,388. We've just raised the motion that says that it's subject to negotiation by staff. There is an annual subscription amount of $6,300. That's an annual payment, again, subject to whatever negotiation staff would do to approve that number. Okay, what about people who can't register online?
Yes.
How would that be handled?
Everything will be going through the system online. Now, what we're looking at doing is setting it up so that if people want to pay here at the Township building, they will be able to. We would then have to enter it online. What we also have talked to Chris about is setting up a computer perhaps in that meeting room downstairs, so that if people are not familiar, they're not comfortable, they want to come in, they want to pay, we could also show them how to do it, so that in the future they'll be able to do it themselves online as well.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We're ready to take a vote. All in favour, say aye. 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 All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thanks again, Ken. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 10, discussion and possible appointment of Barbara Reinhardt to the West Goshen Township Sustainability Advisory Committee. As the board, Ashley, would you like to take the lead on this one?
Sure. So we have a vacancy on the Sustainability Advisory Committee. On March 22nd, the SAC interviewed 2 potential candidates. And I was present, and as was Tina, I think, for that, and Chris, I would think Chris was there too. And then on April 4th, the SAC held a special meeting that was advertised publicly to vote on who they would like to appoint to that vacant position, and unanimously selected Ms. Reinhardt to fill one of the vacancies. So we still have another vacancy.
Correct.
And so a recommendation for somebody for that vacancy will be presented at a future meeting for the SAC. But I got a chance to, and Tina got a chance to talk to Barbara. She was really, really great. I think her vision aligns with the township and with the SAC. Yeah, so she has a good background. Yeah. So we liked her. Everyone on the SAC liked her. So I would recommend that we approve the appointment of Barbara Reinhardt to.
Are you making that motion?
I am.
I will second that motion.
Okay, so I actually made a motion to appoint Barbara Reinhardt to the West Goshen Township Sustainability Advisory Committee, seconded by Tina. Are there any other board questions?
No, I just want to say, I think she's going to be a great addition to the committee.
Yeah.
She lives down the block from me. She's always in the back planting something.
Oh, she lives here?
Yeah. She's, and her resume is quite awesome.
Yeah, got a lot of experience. She fits in very well with our group too.
Awesome. Is there any public questions or comments on the motion? Okay, ready to take the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 11, reports for the month of March 2022. Police report presented by Chief Michael Carroll.
Thank you. The report for the police department for the month of March 2022. Our officers handled 2,290 calls for service. 52 of those were alarms and 7 of the alarms were found to be valid. We handled 57 accidents, 20 of which were reportable accidents, and we drove a total of 19,088 miles. We performed extra traffic enforcement in the areas of Schoolhouse Lane, South High Street, Spruce Avenue, Sunset Hollow Road, Rose Lane, Falcon Lane, Paley Pike, Taylor's Mill Road, and South Five Points Road. Our officers performed all of their normal monthly trainings, and in addition to that, Sergeant Holman, Sergeant Taylor, and Officer Graham attended negotiator training. Sergeant Randizio and Sergeant Holman continued their command and leadership school. Officer Ash attended a PennDOT inspection mechanic training. Detective Edwards attended an informant training. Officer May attended a supervisory school. Officer Hero attended an ERT school. Myself, Captain Domidio, Lieutenant Cotter, and Sergeant Liss all attended an FBI NNA luncheon that had a training involving supervision of police departments. And Officer Walsh attended the DUI checkpoint certification school. And that is the report for the police department for the month.
Is there questions for the chief?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. On your report for ambulance calls, I noticed that 22 Turner Lane did not appear. Is it fair to say that that situation has found a way to resolve itself?
Well, I don't know if it resolved itself, but I believe it's resolved.
Okay, well, that answers the question. On the report from the number of arrests by all the officers in the department, one particular officer, Detective Tillery's, had 23 felonies and 59 misdemeanors for the month. And that seems unusual. I've never seen that many arrests before. Is there some particular incident that occurred?
So that's probably from a couple incidents, but a couple of incidents that had a lot of charges associated with them.
So each time you see an arrest, it's really an individual charge.
Correct.
It could be against one individual, right?
It could be.
Multiple charges against them.
Yeah, we could have a huge month where something along the child porn happens and they get super high number of counts, so you get a big number.
We had a meeting, Tina Reed Smith and I, with you on Monday as part of our liaison monthly meeting with you. We had a number of discussions, a number of issues. Can you give us an update on the dispatcher position and also the intern?
Yes, so we've hired a dispatcher to replace Ethan, who left us, about a month and a half ago. She started work on Monday. She comes from the county dispatch center, so all of her certifications and training are at a high level to begin with, so she's going to be able to start running. She just has to learn the way we do things here in West Goshen, and she should be good to go. And in the midst of all that discussion, our daytime dispatcher, chief dispatcher, Jackie Badman, has handed in her resignation, so she's leaving us. So we have offered that position to a second county employee who has taken the job, and she begins late next week.
You've got a completely new team coming in.
Completely new team, but we really lucked out in that both of them are fully certified and trained on all the county systems, so the training window will be much smaller than normal.
And also we had discussion on this Thursday, there's going to be a continuation of the meetings that began after the George Floyd murder last year, another police advisory community meeting. Can you talk about that a little bit? And also you had a chance to meet with some folks at Dorshana. Can you talk about that a little bit, what that was all about?
Sure. Our next meeting, our next community meeting is this Thursday evening at 6 o'clock here in this room. It's open to anyone in the public to come, and we explained what the first 3 months of the year looked like for the police department, and we pretty much take any questions that come up. Sometimes it's questions of what our view of some national incidents are, but we take all questions. And the first Sunday of this month, I got to attend a Darshana event, which is an informative event about the religions around Hinduism. It was held in Axton, so I got to meet a couple of people there, and I believe they're going to be attending this Thursday meeting.
I have some questions about the Chester County Department of Emergency Services report. Are you able to answer any of those questions, or maybe should I direct them to someone else?
Definitely someone else.
Those are all fire and EMS reports.
I had the same questions, John, regarding that.
I have a question for you, Chief. The dog complaints that we get, it's kind of half a dozen every month kind of thing. Is it, I didn't take the time to go back and look as to whether they were the same locations, etc. Is it consistently the same kind of addresses, or is it random?
It's pretty random, and it's for several reasons. Sometimes a dog gets away, sometimes it's barking, and most of the times when it's barking, we're able to handle it in warnings. We don't usually have to cite people for it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone for the public? Questions?
I had a couple questions about the EMS and fire. Can I address that to you, Grant, possibly?
Sure.
We got some reports here from Chester County Department of Emergency Services, and thanks, Chris, for giving them a lot of information here. On the monthly fire EMS event count by dispatch group, they list 7 agencies that provide services to West Goshen, and that's 54. I go through the list here. 51 FD, and I believe that's First Westchester.
Yes.
52 FD, that's Goodwill.
Yes.
53 FD, that's Fame. 54 is you guys, right? Maine. 55 is Good Fellowship. And then 56 is also Good Goshen Fire. But then they list another one as DESF. And they made 18 calls to West Goshen. Who is DESF? Can you tell us who that is?
Could be the fire marshal's office, but that seems like an awful high number.
It's 18 calls, and they were all at the government services building.
Family services.
601. So you're not familiar with that?
I can make a quick call tomorrow and let you know.
The reason why I ask is because, as you are aware, we're looking to develop a coalition amongst all the service providers for fire and EMS for the township. And our first meeting is on May 26th. 26th. We want to make sure we weren't missing anybody.
Yeah, it sounds like an internal county agency, but I can research that. Let you know.
Mr. Hellman, it might be the Department of Emergency Services.
It's the hazmat team probably. They just dispatch out of the county.
It's because their address is 601 West Town Road, West Goshen, so those all fall under that.
Services building.
Yeah. So they go over the county, so it's probably the hazmat.
So they would be the hazmat folks? Is that probably who they are?
Probably is, yeah.
I can contact Mike Murphy and Mike Grover up at the county and get clarification on
That would be tough, because they need to be included in this.
Yeah, we need
We don't
to-
exclude anybody, let's put it that way.
Right. So that's all right. We'll find out if we need to include them.
Yeah. Which one is that meeting?
That's at 5.
On the 26th?
Yeah.
So just updated, this saw was for West Goshen for all the different fire companies and EMS. So the reason this 601 West Town Road is showing up is when he did the status saw it shows it as being in West Goshen, even though it's probably the originating dispatch of the hazmat team to somewhere else in the county, right?
Or it could be
It could be
responding
West
something
Goshen.
at a county building, at the county government services center. Maybe they had to respond to something there, I don't know.
Probably we said.
You think what he said, yeah.
So it may be something we don't need to have in here, but anyway, trying to figure it out. Sorry.
I actually had a question for Brian also. On the monthly overview, the responses for fire, EMS, and fire and police are running about 12% above last year. Do you know why, Brian, maybe?
Automatic alarms have been running a little bit above last year. I did look at, so I put that comment into the March report. I took a look at the April numbers, and it looks like we're starting to normalize a little bit.
Okay.
April numbers are a little bit down. I think we'll, at the end of April, we'll still be above, but not to that extent.
Okay, that's good.
So I think from a sample size, as we sort of work into the year, it'll level up.
Okay, thank you.
Have you guys reached out to the supervisors yet over in West Town, Goshen, to join these meetings?
I think we decided the last meeting just to keep it within our area first and then reach out.
Any other questions on the reports for the fire and EMS organization? Very good. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 12, Board of Supervisors announcements. Let's start to my left. Tina.
Okay. A couple of things. March 4th, we met with Andrea, John, Lisa, and Chris to discuss the follow-up activities associated with the pipeline tabletop exercises. And we completed pretty much over half of them right now. As we said, we had a few outstanding ones tonight. We talked about the coalition meeting is going to be on, we met on March 28th. We met with the Township employee, John Hellman, on initiating the coalition. We basically have a draft agenda, requested information from the fire and EMS to bring to the first meeting, which they also said that they would be able to have for the May 26th meeting. And then we'll probably meet monthly during the summer and during the budget preparation, and then we'll further evaluate in the fall timeframe how frequency of meeting. I also completed my OSHA 8-hour refresher HAZWOPER 2022 class, completed, passed, and the test, and received my certificate. So I'm now certified in that. We also had a meeting, John and I, with History of Policing Communities of Color Planning meeting. We had a conference call with Sandra Bradley and Dawn Madner to get the Latino community to have more interaction with the community and policy. We're going to follow up on that for additional meetings. John's working on following up with that. As you know, we worked on the incident communications policy. Also, the alert notification communication palm card, which was that little card, was developed, and a large help. I want to give credit to Lisa Cavada, John Hellman, myself, Dave Woodward, to communicate to the residents, and also Chris. That's it.
Thanks, Tina. Robin.
Hi. So the Westchester Area Council of Governments we went to East Bradford Township building to basically restart the agenda. We had something going on in January which had to be postponed. And we had new supervisors from within the COG who all became new members. They nominated me to be the chair for this time period. And but mostly it was just a get-together because people really didn't know who each other was. So we're going to have our next meeting is going to be on May 19th in West Whiteland, July 21st in Thornbury, September 15th in West Town, November 16th in East Goshen.
Is there a key agenda that there is that
Not
the
yet.
COG wants to take on for this year, or is it still sponsored in the neighborhood university program?
Well, they did that last year, and I don't think they were going to bring it back yet.
Okay. So it's like every other couple of years?
Yep. And then the other thing I was working on was the Historical Commission. I was able to, we had an issue, I think you probably are maybe aware, that we had an issue within the Historical Commission about a situation that happened where most of the board members were not familiar with what had been happening with respect to reaching out to the families that had these historical homes. And Kristen was able to find us the ordinance that we needed so that the rest of the commission could be reading it because they'd never read it before. So in the next meeting that we're having for our historical commission, we're going to dive into the information that was already prepared through Kristen's work back in 2019, I think it was. And we're gonna sit down and talk about everything that we're going to be doing in terms of re-energizing the historical commission in a way that if there are historical homeowners who would like to be recognized for the history that they know, stories that they know, allowing the commission specifically, and most importantly to them, is that if there are going to be homes that are destroyed, they want to have access to be able to request photographs, histories, etc. So it will make it a much more vibrant conversation with anybody in the township about it's over 100 homes that are considered historical here. Yeah.
What's the date on that, like the cutoff to be historical? Just curious.
It's not really a date, it's criteria, based on criteria.
Yeah, you're welcome to see a copy of the...
So is that something that you'll bring to the board for a kind of discussion?
We're going to start with it. Yeah, we're going to start with just having a discussion among the actual commission members. I usually just put in my 2 points of view. We are also planning on trying to organize East Goshen, West Goshen, and the borough for Juneteenth as a basically, and including Westtown. So that we can recognize some of the historical soldiers that have been in our township and who died in our township. So the commission is trying to make an effort to work with the borough because up until a couple weeks ago, there was nothing on their schedule for Juneteenth. So our commission is trying to reach out to them so that we can have something more inclusive. They're planning on having the opportunity to have historical discussions from third parties that they're very much aware of. So it could be really interesting. They can come here, have a historical lecture, and then they can go out to other areas within the communities because they're going to have options for places people to go and know about news stories.
Very good. Anything else, Lauren?
Nope, that's it.
Ashley?
I have a couple, I'm just going to roll through these pretty quickly. I just want to recognize Parks and Rec for the Easter egg hunt. It was very successful. A lot of people came out for that. Tina was there. The Sustainability Committee had a table there. Thank you guys for recognizing the Sustainability Committee while we were there. We were handing out reusable bags that we'd ordered, and it was really popular. People were taking them. A lot of people seem to know about the plastic bag ban, which is really good. Reminder, it starts Friday, Earth Day. I think a lot of places are ready from what I've seen and from what we've heard, so I think we're ready for that. The other thing was Arbor Day. Just a reminder, we're celebrating Arbor Day on April 29th at Oakland Cemetery. We're honoring Dr. Rock, who was like the father of trees in Pennsylvania. Susan knows way more about him than I do. We're honoring this tree, so that starts at 5 o'clock. The other thing that I wanted to bring to the board too is when we got our Tree City recognition, they're actually starting a new program for K-12 schools, which I think is really interesting. And they urge municipalities that have been recognized to sort of reach out to the schools within the community to see if they are interested in pursuing that. It's different criteria for them to meet it, but we can be sort of, I don't know, a helping hand since we just went through the process. So I talked with the Sustainability Committee about doing that. And the other thing that I've been talking to the Sustainability Committee about is creating wildlife corridors throughout the township, and pollinator corridors. So there's potential that we might be able to talk with PennDOT and work with them. I know a lot of these are state roads, like the 322 bypass and sort of just like on the side highways and things like that. There's a lot of brush there that doesn't get maintained anyway, that if we were able to sort of go in and replant with self-sustaining plants that actually have flowers on them, yeah, native species, that it would be really beneficial to the environment, and it would also just look really nice. So I'm bringing that up to sustainability. I'll have more on that.
Thanks, Ashley. John?
Okay, on Saturday, March the 26th, in the morning there, I and some other board members there joined up with the CRC with the Goose Creek cleanup behind McDonald's there on Montgomery Avenue. What was it, about like 3 dozen volunteers or something there? I was pretty Yeah, and I don't know how many tons of trash are moved out of the creek bed along there, but it's always a great annual activity, which actually, I think it's been 2 years now we haven't done it, so it's been overdue. So that was a great opportunity there for volunteers to give back to the community. Robin, you didn't mention this, but I will. On Wednesday, April the 6th, you and I had a meeting with Steve Pellman, with the Westchester Fire Chief, and he gave us a tour of the 3 fire companies here in Westchester Borough. First, Westchester Goodwill and Fame. It was very informative, learning about their operations and their revenues and their expenses and so on and so forth. So it was a good chance to meet up with them. Well, let's see what else we got here. I think that's just about it, because everything else has already been talked about. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, John. I just have a couple of announcements. The board met in executive session earlier this evening to discuss a police public safety matter. We will be meeting in executive session on April the 21st to discuss a review of the township manager, his performance against his 2022 objectives. And just as a follow-up from the last meeting where there was a conversation about potential redevelopment at the Quality Inn property at 943 South High Street. This will be on the agenda again at the next Board of Supervisors public meeting on May the 3rd at 6 o'clock. So I just wanted to announce that because there were a lot of people who attended that meeting. They may not be in the room right now, but I'm giving them a heads up that the board will have a full board discussion around a way forward at the next meeting. Okay, next on the agenda is Township Manager's announcements, item 13.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few announcements. Our April e-newsletter will go out on Friday, April 22nd. Summer camp registration for this year opens up on May 7th and May 14th here at the Township building. Based on earlier discussion, this will probably be the last year for the manual registrations here as we migrate things online. I'd like to give a special thank you to Matt Halverson for the work of the sewer department and helping a resident out at a recent event last week that avoided a potentially big situation with a lost dog, and we got a nice compliment from the resident involved. I'd also like to echo Ms. Gagne's comments and thank Ken, Tom, and all the members of the Parks Department for the successful Egg Hunt on Saturday. It was quite the event. And finally, the board is looking at potentially rescheduling the May 17th meeting due to the primary election that will be held here for the upcoming general election in November. We will announce any changes to the schedule on the Township website.
Well, we'll definitely not be having it on the 17th.
Yes, it definitely will not be occurring on May 17th. But we will announce any changes on the Township website.
Thanks, Chris. Next is item 14, Township Engineers announcements.
Mr. Chairman, as Robin mentioned, the Westchester Area Council of Governments held a meeting on March the 17th. I attended that meeting as well, and Mark Lucas, who is the Township Engineer for East Bradford, and I presented a PowerPoint presentation regarding the MS4 program, how that operates, what the requirements are, and also discussion of the PRP and TMDL requirements. Other than that, I think we talked about stormwater enough tonight. For Jerakian, no work has begun yet, again, on the open space areas. However, the phase 4 plans we will probably receive within the next week or two. So that will probably be ready for approval, possibly in May, but I would think definitely by June.
Is there a connection between the phase 4 plan and the timeline for the park open space?
Not directly, no. We do need to review the letter that we had from a year or so ago and see how they're doing on the timeline, because I suspect they're not doing too well.
Yeah, Rick and I had a conversation with Ms. Zara about that, and we all agreed that we would pull it back out and figure out where we are and determine if something needs to be done about where we are.
Yeah, I would really like the board to know what's been going on, because they came to the board with some issues and concerns, and we had a whole shopping list that we went through with them, and we nailed all these things down and had timelines, and I would like to hold them to what they said they were going to do if possible, and certainly let the board know if they failed to live up to what they said they were going to do relative to those improvements.
Yeah, we'll go back to you on that, for sure.
Thanks. Anything else for
That's all I have, thank you.
Next is zoning officers announcements. Jamie.
Thank you. At the March 28th zoning hearing board meeting, the zoning hearing board approved a dimensional variance for an attached garage for a property at 833 Rosary Lane. The zoning hearing board will be having the next meeting on Monday, April 25th at 7 p.m. to make a decision on the hearing from March 28th, 1115 Westchester Pike, where a proposal for a use change, or use variance for an overnight kennel and dog daycare facility is proposed. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Next is item number 16, approval of Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of March 15th, 2022 and April the 5th, 2022. Has the board had a chance to review the minutes, and is there any corrections, omissions that need to be addressed?
Corrections.
There was one I saw on the April 5th meeting minutes, which I think is just Alan Myers is 2 L's, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll correct that.
I told you I looked at it. I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes of the March 15th and April 5th Board of Supervisors meetings with that correction. Is there any other comments or questions from the board?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tina. Is there any public comments or questions on the minutes? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next is agenda item number 17, approval of the Treasurer's report dated March 31st, 2022 for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Is there a motion to approve the fund and bill payment? The fund accounts and the bill payments.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks,
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tina. Any board questions or comments on the bills this month? I saw a bill in here, I can't find it right now, for the SPCA. Is that an annual bill or is it a monthly bill?
It's a monthly bill, and there's also costs for animals that are picked up
So
in
it's
West
kind of
Goshen.
variable depending on the month. Okay, it's a little higher this month, I think.
Depends on the animals that are picked up in house.
It's an issue. Townships are starting to pass ordinances to try to pass those fees on to the dog owners, so they can get out of control. The fees.
I don't have it to hand. How much was it? Does anybody?
I questioned that last month, too.
You did?
Yes, I did. It was like $600 or something.
It was higher than that this month.
West Namio, one of my townships in Upper Chester County, is adopting an ordinance in May to pass on that cost to the property owner. Because they're a very small township, they don't have a lot of revenue, and they're getting hit quite a bit by fees.
Can we do that here?
I can share with you the draft.
Yeah,
and take a look
I'd
at
like
it
to.
for discussion. Yeah.
Yes, I would
Sure.
like to do that.
Okay.
So do that.
All right, thank you.
Say they were picked up in Goshen. Another township.
Someone else's dog.
We're paying the fee for any dog that's picked up in Goshen Township, we pay that fee.
And it was someone else's dog on my side.
Yes, the bid.
It could potentially be.
Yes, strongly bid.
So Kristen, you'll bring that.
Sure.
to the board's
I'll send it to you.
attention. Is there any other board questions or comments on the bills? Is there any public comments or questions on the bills we paid?
Yeah. One quick question, and I would have forgotten about it until Chief mentioned the resignation of a dispatcher. I did see that a charge for $140 for boots for a dispatcher, and when I scanned it and saw this first and forgot about it, I was just curious, like the policy of which employees we buy uniforms for. Obviously, I know there's reimbursements to take care of in, shirts, Township, but I was surprised that we buy boots for a dispatcher.
We do.
Okay.
So you just bought her boots, but she's leaving, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We bought her the boots last month, but she's a resident.
I don't know those are for her.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it was
not
for
sure
her.
it's her.
I don't know who they're for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the things when I talk about having like a forensic, like audit, just look for things like that where, it might be a policy we want to keep, that's fine, but, does the board know about some of these, and would that be a policy that they agree with?
Mm-hmm.
So just where we can cut
I
costs.
appreciate you catching that particular item this month. Any other questions or comments on the bills? Okay, we've had a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Last on the agenda is number 18, public comment. Is there any comments or issues anyone would like to raise that have not been discussed as part of the agenda tonight? Okay, don't see any. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Ashley and John, all in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. We're adjourned. Thank you. I know we can't
Yeah,